seen horrors that you've seen. But you have no right to call me a murderer. You have a right to kill me. You have a right to do that. But you have no right to judge me. It's impossible through words to describe what is necessary to those who do not know what horror means. Horror. Horror has a face, and you must make a friend of horror. Horror and moral terror are your friends. If they are not, then they are enemies to be feared. They are truly enemies.
My name is Dustin Kelly, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm prior Army, serving as both a Ford observer and a military police officer. I've spent the last 14 and a half years as a police officer and detective in a large metropolitan police department. Two things that I've learned throughout my career. One, everybody has a story to tell. And two, the best stories are true. This is the DTD Podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD Podcast. This quote from Apocalypse Now rings true and deep with this week's guests. In the studio, Jeff Morris, a former infantry officer in the United States Army, serving 2 deployments to Baghdad, Iraq as a platoon leader and company commander. And through him, Legion 8 lives on. He's been featured in numerous magazine articles, television profiles, and speaks to a wide array of audience. He now lives with his wife and 4 children. Welcome to the studio, Jeff.
What's going on, brother? Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to start out with that. That seems like a big point of your book. It's where we're going to lead to. And after I read that in the book, I went and looked it up, watched it again. Of course, I've seen Apocalypse Now, but I wanted to hear it from him. And it gives a whole new meaning of how you put it in the book. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about your childhood. Before you came to the military, talk about kind of your parents and things like that and what you kind of wanted to do as you were coming up.
Yeah, man. I was born in Alabama and moved to Florida, Destin, Florida, when I was 3, 4, maybe. Don't really remember. Early childhood, maybe not the best of memories. My parents split when I was really young, and then for whatever reason got remarried right away. And so then we got down to Florida and they split again. And yeah, those were, not good times. But my mom was amazing and, took me and my older brother, Mike, and just, as a kid, you don't realize, that maybe things are different. It is what it is. You don't realize that, mom working a job during the day and then going to, bartend or cocktail waitress at night. And then, we go to sleep. The apartment complex we lived in, shit that, parents would get child protective services called on them nowadays. It's just a different world. But, like we would, she'd get us to bed and go bartend, and the apartment complex security guard would come by the apartment and check on us, and then she would come back in at 2 a.m. God, this is, I'm 6 years old when this started, maybe 8-year-old. Then she had to pick up another job, like delivering newspapers. So she would come in and wake me and my brother up, 2 times a week and go deliver the Destin log. We'd drive around, 2-3 hours at night, and me and my brother would sit in the back and roll newspapers, and she would throw them out the door. But I look back on it, and, now in hindsight, I realized it was pretty tough, but at the time, and I had fun, great friends, played a lot of sports. I lived in an amazing place. You don't realize how nice Destin, Florida is until you get older and realize, hell, there's a reason why people come and vacation here all the time. Yeah, man, so just, school and sports were my deal. I think early on I saw how hard my mom was working and the financial struggles that we were going through. And, uh, I just didn't want her to have the divorce hit my older brother a lot harder just because he was older and kind of got what was going on. But for me, I kind of took it as a way of, mom's got enough on her plate, so I want to give
Right.
her one less thing to worry about. So, I really just tried to, school came pretty easy and tried to focus on that. And yeah, man, just like I said, give her one less thing to worry about. She had enough on her plate.
And were you thinking towards the future at all right then, or were you kind of just in the moment? Because, I ask that every week to people. Hey, what were you thinking about? And I hear some guys go, man, from 7 years old on, I knew I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And I've even
Yeah.
talked to like Jack Carr, where Jack Carr said, I knew I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And then I knew I wanted to retire from being a Navy SEAL and be a best-selling author. And he did both. And it's
Yeah.
amazing to hear people, because I know when I was 7, there was a couple different things I wanted to do. And you think about stuff, but I ask this question every week. And I hear people say, from the answer of, yeah, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, to, man, I was just trying to kind of get by. And it seems that the people that are just trying to get by seem to get their focus later on in life, and they really kind of zero in that focus almost to like a crazy extent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I would say I fall into that category of the focus came later in life. But what I think did come early in life was uh, I saw that I didn't want to struggle like we were struggling. And and again, look, my mom is, I mean, you've read enough about her. My mom, we could sit here and talk for 2 hours about how awesome that woman is and just the example and the work ethic that she taught me. But I just looked around, I just remember thinking, like, I didn't want life to be that hard when I got older. And now, what the hell did that mean? What was I going to do? I mean, they were all kind of, I was going to be a pro baseball player. Then I wanted to be a pro football player. Then I wanted to be a lawyer. Then I wanted to be a FBI special agent. Then I wanted to be in the military. So all these different things kind of went through my head, but the common denominator in all that was I I wanted more than what I had.
And so when we talk about that, and you talk about all those things, and you talk about how awesome your mom was, I want to talk about your dad for a minute. And he wasn't around a lot, from the book and stuff. I want to know
Yeah.
one good thing you took and something that you thought, I'll never ever do that, because I want to kind of bring that up later on when we start talking about being a parent and things that you were doing. But
Yeah.
one good thing that you took from him, and then one that you were like, I'll never do that. I'm going to be the kind of parent that does this.
Yeah. So I think if there was one good thing that I took from him, uh, he was successful. And I think there was this idea, and again, you kind of pick up on things of, you know, all right, I'm at home all the time. Things are one way, but when I go with dad, we get to go do fun stuff and get new bikes and get cool stuff and get to go do, nice things. So I think I kind of saw that as like, all right, I want to be like that without being like that, if that makes sense.
Got it. Nope.
Uh, yeah. And again, look, I mean, it's, we get along well now. I mean, you picked up on it. Bro, I called him. I didn't say anything about it for a while, and I called him about a month before we went years without speaking, and then over the last 10 years or so, kind of maybe I guess a little bit longer, kind of came back into each other's life. But I called him before and said, hey, I want to let you know that I have this book coming out, and there's going to be nothing bad said about you in it, but there's going to be nothing good said about you in it either. And I think people, and I said, I know how you are. You're going to tell all your friends about it. And I'm just like prepping you up front. This is how it's going to be. And, and look, man, I'll give the guy credit. He'll be the first one to tell you that, hey, I didn't do what I should have done back then. And we had this talk, gosh, probably, I guess it was around 10 years ago. And he just said, I can't change it. All I can do is try to, just through my actions, be better. And I've never subscribed to the idea, and people can have their own opinions, and that's fine. But never subscribed to the idea that just because someone is your dad, they got your mom pregnant, that doesn't make them a father. And my stepdad was always much more of the father figure in my life. But I give my dad credit now that he acknowledges that and uh, doesn't ask for forgiveness, just ask for a chance to uh, come back into our life. So yeah, he has. He's come. He's visited my kids, and again, we get along. We get along well now. But to your point of like, what did I? So I told you what I got from him. What did I not? And and I won't go into all the details, not because I don't want to share it. I told you earlier I was an open book
Right.
because it
Yeah,
involves some
absolutely.
things involving my mom. But I remember, at a pretty young age that, no teenage kid wants to look at their dad, as a middle teenage kid and say, I heard what you said and, I know what you did. And you did that to the most important person in my life. And you said, you should be I should be one of that person too. And I told him that, all you've done is set the example that when I'm a dad one day of what not to do. And
Can I ask you a question if it's not getting too personal?
yeah,
Because it's something that comes
no,
up in
no,
my
shoot.
mind when you say that. Do you ever think of the situation, and we don't have to get real deep into it, why I'm asking the question or why your answer is the way it is, but do you ever think that when you're an adult and you look back and you're a parent now and you've got these kids, do you ever look at those things when people say, "Look, I know I messed up and I just want to change it"? It's easy now. It's easy to say that now.
Oh
There's
yeah,
no more
yeah.
struggle anymore. So it's
No,
very
hey,
easy to go, look, I want to be close and I want to, well, fucking course you do, because it's easy now.
yeah,
It's very
yeah,
easy to just pick up a phone
yeah,
and say hi or do whatever. And I think that you hear a lot of these guys that didn't have dads around and things like that. That's what they get when they're older. I'm so proud of you. You've done this and you've done this. Yeah, without you being there. So, you know,
Oh no, man. There was a stretch, so I again, we talked some when I was deployed. I had this big email, my first deployment,
right.
this email thread. He asked to be on it. I'd keep people updated on stuff. And, when I got the award and, that deployment, I reached out to him separately and I was like, look, I know what you're going to do. You're going to like, oh, look at my boy type deal. And I'm like, and I don't want you to do it. And then I'll be damned, he sends me a newspaper article from the local newspaper. It's like, father of local war hero. I may get somebody else's words. I'm not saying that at all. And I called him and I was like, or I emailed him. I was like, what the fuck, man? It's uh so anyways, fast forward a couple of years, second deployment, get home and so I have my brother and then, got two half brothers from one of his marriage and one half brother from one of his other marriages. And, he would call and check in and text me and literally it was, I'd see it was him, I'd pick up the phone and I'd be like, have you called, XYZ, my other brothers? Have you called them? When was the last time you talked to them? Well, I haven't. I'd hang up on them. And I'm like, it's cool and convenient to have the son that you can tell your buddies about, that went off and did these things. But being a father is about being a father to all your kids, not because one of them went out and did something that in society's eyes is noble. So when you start being a father to them, then you and I can have a chance. And that went on for several years, man. But he did, and it wasn't the, you know, to your point, what you're talking about of, I want to get back in your life. It was just more of, let me try to earn the right to do it. And now, I agree 100% with what you're saying. Part of it was like, all right, let's see how long this goes, but we're going on 10 years now, so I got to give credit where credit's due. And like, do we have a great relationship? No. Do we have a bad one? We don't talk much.
It's there.
But to me, it's
It's a
there. It's
relationship.
exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's all it is. And I think he and I, heck, my wife now is probably more. Again, coming from that very close knit family, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't always see it the same way you do.
Right. Yeah. And that can cause some tension because it's very hard to explain that to someone who wants to be different than that. You know what I'm saying? That comes from that close relationship. It's
Yeah,
very hard to
yeah,
explain that, look, just because someone is who they are doesn't make them who they are.
right,
You know,
exactly. And she gets it. I think early on it was hard, but now. she gets it. And like I say, is it a great thing? I mean, of course. Do I wish it was different? Yeah, like everybody. I mean, I do everything in my power. I mean, anytime I have a bad day or I'm human, lose my temper with my kids, that's sort of my moral compass and the thing that always kind of gets me zeroed back in of like, well, I know what I'm not going to be. I'm going to be, the exact opposite of that. And I want my kids to never be sitting around on a podcast 30 years from now having this conversation with somebody about their old man.
Right. Right. Well, so let's move on a little bit. We talked about it. You went to school, you played football, you wanted to be a federal law enforcement agent, you wanted to be a lawyer, and then you sit down to take the LSAT. Now, here's where you and I will get along very well because I sit down and took that very test when I
Okay.
graduated from college, and it sucked. And it was one of the dumbest tests I've ever taken. It made absolutely no
Oh
sense and
God.
had nothing to do with the law. So when you say that's where you lost focus and said, you know what, I think I want to be in the military, I completely understand. Now, do I look back on it and think maybe I should have done a little more? Maybe I should have taken it maybe more seriously? Yeah, maybe. But you decide you want to go in the military and you decide you want to be a Navy SEAL. And you start training. Now we got to talk about your training because
I knew this was coming.
listen, man,
Oh yeah.
look, you're the fitness guru here. You're the CrossFit guy, but we've got to talk about your early training regimen. When you decided that, hey, here's a good idea. I'm going to run on the beach. I'm going to swim in the cold water. And not only am I going to do that, but I'm going to take sand and rub it all over my crotch and my legs until it gets burned. And that's going to teach me how I should do when I go to school. Now, first off, where in the hell did you get that idea?
Now again, in my defense, let's go back. This is
Okay.
mid '90s, kind of internet just coming to play. Like what
Charlie
you see
Sheen's
of Navy
movie is
SEALs
out.
is Charlie Sheen's movie. It's the Dick Marcinko books,
Okay.
and I just remember I can't remember if it was in the Marcinko books or another one that I read, but I remember one time them talking about one of the worst parts of buds outside of the cold water was how bad you would get chafed. And having played sports my whole life, freaking jock strap or, whatever, it's like just constant chafing, whether, football pants, whatever it may be. And so, hey man, the mind of a, 22-year-old jock who thinks he's 10 foot and bulletproof, like, all right, what better way to overcome that? If there's something that's in the way, you can either go around it or go through it. And usually the shortest way is to go right through it. So I'm going to go right through this thing and I'm going to build up, calluses for it. I still got calluses on the inside of my elbows from playing baseball from head first slides. And they're like, oh, you just got to get the strawberries and build up a callus. So in my dumbass mind, it made sense that I'm going to build up a callus on the inside of my thighs
Now, those are
from
your
the
words,
sand.
not mine. Okay. I just want to point that out.
Oh,
Those are your
no.
words.
Yeah. And so yeah, man, just misery. And again, I always say, like, something happens once, it's an event, twice, it's a coincidence, three times, it's a trend. The trend was there that, hey, I'm not building up a callus. This shit sucks
Yeah.
every time. And then, so yeah, you read it when I finally, and the book doesn't do it justice, man. Uh, I wish I could, like, I wish I had a picture of this dude, that SEAL that I took the test in front of. I
That's what
mean,
I was
just,
getting ready to get to because
yeah.
not only did you train like this, which was a horrible idea, but you passed your PT test with flying colors, but you failed the mental test because you tried to tell this guy who's been there and done that, look, here's how I got ready for this. I chafed my balls and I thought that was going to help me out. Now, I once again asked what was going through your mind that you thought that's going to be a good thing to tell this guy.
See, at the time, I thought like finally someone that will get it. Like, this guy again, he barely like he pulled up, I'm there waiting, and I was fortunate, my buddy's dad who had been a SEAL, we lived down there by Eglin Air Force Base, and so he hooked up at Earlwood Field, the Air Force Special Operations Command, and got in touch with the SEAL liaison. And so instead of me having to go off to a naval base and do it with 200 other swinging dicks, I got to do a one-on-one with this guy. And so this guy shows up and, meet him down at the bay and like literally got out of his Jeep and just walked over to me,
Did he have an
I haven't done
aura
that.
around him? Did you see?
Oh yeah, dude, yeah. I mean, just see, I mean, again, cast out of a movie. I mean, just like CJ7, no doors on it, pulls up, the short brown shorts, the black shirt, the freaking sweet stash. He's like 6'3", and I hope, I always say, like, man, I hope at some point one of these things that I'm out talking on, this guy somehow stumbles across it and is like, holy shit, I remember that dumb kid.
Do you remember his
Yeah,
name?
so I don't. I don't. I mean, I was so freaking scared. He could have, he probably told me. I remember I called him sir. He told me to shut up. He worked for a living. He's a master chief. And so, I mean, that's really pretty much all he says. He's like, all right, let's get started. And then didn't say, he's like, all right, this is a standard. Tell me what to do. I would go do it, come back. And it's when we got done, when, like you said, he's like, all right, man, you're in good shape. What else are you doing? And this is when I thought, coming full circle of like, here's my moment for someone that will understand, the motivation and all the stuff I'm willing to put myself through. And so I told him, I was just like, yeah. So I get in the water, then I get out and I throw a bunch of sand down my pants, because I hear chafing's really bad. Then I go, and man, he just like, I kid you not. I mean, just like hand, right here in my face. He's like, you did what? And I was like, well, I hear chafing. And at this point, I'm scared shitless. And he just looked at me and, son, that is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard of in my life. That is like practicing getting kicked in the nuts. It sucks every single time. So let me give you a little bit of advice in life. If something doesn't make sense, don't do it. And and that was it. That was our interaction. And I'm just deflated, But I tell you though, man, that was a life lesson that carried on, not through training, ultimately not getting in the military and then going back and trying to get in later, and then even on the battlefield later on of just sometimes I would have that quiet pause in my mind and like, does this make sense what we're doing? And
And,
so the guy taught
and
me more than,
yeah, and that's what I was going to say.
yeah.
As a commander, do you ever look back and go, man, I thought the same thing? Like people would tell me I'm going to do this, and you're like, you idiot, do it like this. It's so much easier. Work smarter, not harder.
Oh, the first deployment, getting a call on the radio one day, VBIDs were becoming prevalent. This was, spring, summer of '04 when the insurgency was really, really kicking into high gear and literally getting a mission one day and was, hey, we have intel reports of a white sedan and the trunk is weighted down and it's parked in this parking lot behind the hotel series. Can you guys go and confirm that and check out the trunk? So you want me to take 30 men to go over for a thing that all signs point to it being a V bid and go confirm? Like, what are we gonna do? Walk up on it, pop the trunk? Like, yep, we got one. Yeah, just some of the stupid shit that would happen. So needless to say, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that stuff stuck with me. It really did.
Now, I want to ask, do you think everything happens for a reason? Do you really feel that way? Because I think that paths are, you can forge your own way, but I think paths are kind of set.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I've always now I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say sometimes life throws something your way where it's hard to argue. But I guess I've always felt that, when people say things happen for a reason, I kind of think there's the people in life that go out and make things happen, and there's other people that sit around and talk about how life's been so hard on them. And I think that for the people that make things happen or are successful, and success being an eye of the beholder, call it happy. It's when something negative goes wrong. The other people say, "Oh, well, things happen for a reason. I guess it just wasn't meant to be for me." And the other people say, "Well, shit, this happened. Let me go find another way to do it." Uh, but yeah,
The
but
reason that I
again, there
ask
are
that though
things.
is because you pass the PT test, you fail kind of the mental test, but then you start having lots of shoulder problems, and the Navy says, "Yeah, we're done." Now, let's say you get into the Navy. Let's say you go through, do whatever it is you're going to do.
I
Then
would
the
have been out by
Legion,
9/11.
then the Legion never happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
those are the things that
and that's what I mean by pass or set, because I agree with you. People that want to make things happen, make things happen. But I feel like paths of where we're supposed to end up are kind of set.
and that's where I struggle with. Sometimes I talk out of both sides of my mouth. When I tell people what I just told you, and then I have the mom of one of the guys that I lost, that second deployment, come up and say, I don't know why God took Jimmy, but I know why he kept you here. And it's because if you weren't here, then this wouldn't have started and all our boys' names. How do you, I don't have a response to that. So, yeah. So I say I don't think things happen for a reason, but usually not a day goes by where I'm not challenged in some way to maybe think about it from a different perspective.
To put all this final stuff in perspective, before we get into deployments, before we get into the military, we've got to bring one more kind of piece of the puzzle into it. We've got to bring your job, and we've got to bring Chrissy into the story, because I think
Yeah.
Chrissy is a major factor throughout this entire book. At sometimes as a reader, a very frustrating factor. And I say that from a perspective of being the one that's looking from the outside in. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah.
And we'll get more into it as we talk about her. But you go to CarMax, you're doing great, you're promoted quickly to buyer, you have kind of set your sights on, hey, this is what I'm going to do, this is the way we're going to go. Then a guy gives you Black Hawk Down, that fire starts burning again, and you want to go back to the military. And you have Chrissy, and she's all on board with you, and everything's going great. And then you get in the military, you get in the Army, and you have to be gone quite a bit right up front.
Yeah.
And it's for a multitude of reasons, whether that be, your officer basic, maybe Ranger School, all these kind of things that you have to be gone. And every time you guys are face to face in the book, it's, we're going to get through this, we're going to do this. And every time you separated, it seemed to go 180 degrees in the other direction. Now, the question that I have for it is, were you different when you left? Or was she different when you left? Or were you both different when you left?
It was both of us, for sure. And, I'm kind of one of those people that's wired that when I go and do something like that, I'm all in. And I'm a big believer, in kind of some of the things that helped me deal with my early childhood was always, you know, the mental discipline and preparation for what's next, and always kind of planning for what's next and what's in front of me. And then it's sometimes risking not enjoying what I have right in front of me. And for her, she came from a military life, Air Force dad. Again, she was incredibly supportive of it. Didn't involve any deployments, got to live in different parts of the world, cool things. So the idea of a military life, like, heck yeah, this is what I grew up with. This will be awesome. So then you throw that into it, and it's like, well, wait, no, my dad wasn't gone 2.5 of the first 3 years of, my life. And for me, I'm like mentally preparing myself of like, yeah, all right, you love this woman, we just got married, and uh, but I have these other things that I got to prepare for. So it was and it's funny the reactions to different people. I mean, some people have said like you, like, oh, that was frustrating, and I have others that are just like, I really hated for her, and I almost felt sorry, and can kind of see why. I think it's ultimately just came down to that we were two people who cared for each other, immensely, and we had this amazing son together. But both our ideas of what we thought that experience was going to be like were completely separate. And then you factor in, I get over there and what we're going through. You can't. And I probably kept more from her than maybe I needed to.
Oh,
Maybe
we're
I
going to
should
get
have.
into that.
Yeah. But so for her, it was always, I'm like, I'm dealing with all this crap of what we're going through. And you can't just pick up the phone and like flip the switch. Hey, baby, how's it going? Can't wait to get home. You kind of have to stay in that, you can to a certain degree, but it's almost faking it in some ways. And for her, it was always that, like, why can't I be that release for you? I know you have all this stuff going on. You're not telling me about it. Why aren't you opening up to me about other things? And so, this small little crevice just became a huge, you know, fracture as time went on.
Well, you bring it up, so let's get into it. Why can't she be released? Because I thought the same thing reading the book.
Yeah, it was, you know, compartmentalizing. things. Like as soon as I do that, and people are wired different. Some people can go and just open up that. For me, just the position I was in with everything that was going on there in Haifa Street, uh, if I open up once, then I open up more, and then I'm thinking about stuff while I should be focused on the mission at hand. And right or wrong, you're in charge of 34 men, and what's quickly becoming one of, if not the most dangerous parts of all of Baghdad, all of Iraq, at the time. So it was just that guard of, or compartmentalize, whatever military cliche you want to use, box in the back of your mind. You just put stuff, and at some point it's going to fill up. And yeah, I just kept it all inside.
That was the thing when I read through, because you know I've told you that I was prior military, but more often I speak from a first responder point of view. When you have jobs, people have to be supportive of each other. But I've also learned not only do people have to be supportive, but you have to explain sometimes why you have to be supportive. And I know that sounds really stupid, but it's a basic thing. Like I think they want to be part of it. And I understand exactly what you're saying, compartmentalizing and all those kind of things. And I noticed that through the whole thing. But if we're going to be real honest, you didn't really open up to a lot of people in general.
No. And that's why I ended up in the boat that I was in there for 5 years after the fact. It was, and some of that, and again, if you want to get all Freudian here and like go back to,
I don't think I do.
we're we'll just maybe not that Freudian as you're thinking, you pervert, but no, you say if you want to start getting into the middle part of it, like all I saw growing up was a certain thing, and
Right.
I saw there's a reason, you can kind of put two and two together, of like, why did I always want to stand up for people that couldn't stand up for themselves, you know, and to do that as a young kid, to process that, and I internalized it all, and so I had all these feelings inside, like why did I always go and I would get in a fight in a heartbeat standing up for somebody else. Now I did a horrible job, standing up for myself, but if it involved somebody else, I was there. But for me, I kept everything inside because I just always felt like I could take it, put it on my shoulders. I'm the one that can take it, put that burden on me so it doesn't have to be on someone else. Now, that was naive, short sighted, and I've learned and grown from that over the years. But, uh, it was that same mindset. I say naive, but it was that same mindset that wired me, I think, to be able to deal with those things. And when those things happened, I saw others and how they would respond, and not, I hate to use the term be as strong because I think that's kind of cheesy, but I think you get what I'm saying. So it's a double-edged sword. It really is. I think it made me, I'm not going to say good. I think it made me effective at my job and as a leader for the circumstances we were under, at the expense of personal relationships.
Well, let's talk about when you get over there. So the way I understood it, you were working S2 when you get over there. You were working S2 shop over there. Now you were still going out on patrols and
Yeah.
stuff, working with guys, but your main job was S2, correct?
Yeah, but it was somewhat deceiving. Like
Okay.
I worked in the S2 shop at night, and the primary thing was get out, go on as many patrols as you can. Shadow these guys, learn from them, learn the terrain because you're going to be taking over here in a couple of months. The S2 gig was, I mean, truth be told, and it's one of those, they tell you, like when you go in the army, like someone gave me this advice. They're like, never volunteer for anything and never ever let anyone know you can type fast. And one of those just random skills that life gave me is I am an incredibly fast typer. And I let that slip one time. And so after all this stuff went down in the day, I would just go to the S2 shop at night. And it was basically, I would work 2 hours or 6 hours. And it was all about typing up all the after action reports and stuff for the morning brief.
Uh, the first time that it got real for you, is that when the RPG struck the Humvee and killed Jeremy Hines, or was it before that?
So there was an incident before that when I first got there. I'd been there a couple of days, and uh, the platoon that I thought I was going to be taken over at the time, they had gone into one of the battalions or one of the companies, excuse me, that was attached to us from the Arkansas National Guard. They had been attacked and lost a soldier. And just seeing that platoon leader, who I'd got to know, they'd introduced me to him, said, hey, spent a lot of time with him. That's probably going to be your platoon. And just seeing him coming into the talk that night, covered in blood, uh, it's like shit's a weekend country, and you're seeing something like that. And then, so that was the platoon I went out with the most.
That
So
was
yeah, I got to know the guys.
Charlie. I'm sorry. That was Charlie, right?
Yeah, yep, yep.
Okay.
Second platoon, Charlie 19, and so yeah, so I got to know a lot of the guys, and then going over, Hines, who you mentioned, again, I thought I was going to be taken over. He was the PL's driver, so and I'm not going to claim him that I knew him great because I'm not going to disrespect the other guys that had a much closer relationship with him, but I'd gotten to know him, and so that was really the first time of like someone that I knew, and then when he was killed by the RPG, it was just another reminder of, you know, shit's real.
And so, how are you balancing it in your head? So, from everything I read in the book, it seemed like you wanted to get out there, get into the middle of it, lead soldiers, do all these things. Then you see this, and you see that it's becoming very real. Now, the first time you're really in action is, from what I understood, at the I think it's like a salt factory.
Yeah, so we were actually driving. It was actually a little before that. It was August 12th, so we just hit the anniversary of 2004.
Okay.
So then so if you step back, so when I did take over a platoon, Charlie Company was up there on the Fob Headhunter, ended up becoming Fob Independence at Luthana Airfield right off Haifa Street. And there was a last minute change of plans, and they sent me to be a platoon leader with Alpha Company. Well, Alpha Company had swapped places with that company from the Arkansas National Guard. So uh, we went down, Alpha Company went down the international zone to be attached to, it was like first of the 153rd Arkansas National Guard. Great soldiers, by the way, no knock on National Guard at all. Because the company they sent up, their Charlie Company, man, those guys went through all kind of shit on Hyper Street and were awesome. But yeah, so I went from thinking I was going to be on all this action there on Hyper Street to down patrolling, just south of the international zone around Baghdad University, and nothing was going on. So we did that for about a month. Uh, I mean, hell, you might as well have been driving around Dallas. I mean, there's nothing happening in that area.
Well, there's plenty
Shit,
happening
probably
in
worse than
Dallas.
Dallas. Yeah, probably worse than Dallas now. Yeah, before I left.
Yeah, there's plenty happening there.
Yeah, but just from a safety standpoint. But then things on Haifa got so bad that they pulled us back up there to go to help out, just to have another mechanized company up there. So it was August 12th, and we were going up just to kind of familiarize ourselves with the area. And then that's when they had again, I always reference Black Hawk Down, straight tires in the road, on fire, black smoke everywhere, forcing us to turn left. Of course, what do our dumbasses do? We turn left, and as soon as we do, a couple teams popped out from around the corner and, fired an RPG, went in between me and my platoon sergeants, Bradley's, and another two-man little fire team popped out. I mean, it was quick. I mean, over instant, like literally fire and forget, they were gone. And so yeah, that was our first, call it combat cherry popped. And then, the first time it was a little more sustained was a few days after that in the salt factory where you're talking about.
Right. And I have that. I mixed the two up. I have it down as August 12th. That's approaching Grenade Alley is where everything happened, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the
And
bigger
so
engagement.
the Salt Factory Day, so you kind of get it in your blood then. You fire on an enemy, you're in the, I guess you would say, quote unquote, the thick of battle. And it becomes very important to you then, not only that you want to be in it now because you know that feeling, but it's also, you called it in the book a tangible win on stuff, where if you attack a target or you take a bad guy down or you take them out of action, it's a tangible win. And we'll get into further why you call it a tangible win on this first one. But how are you feeling now? Has anything that you've noticed in your body, has it started to change, or are you just like, man, this is what I signed up for, this is great, let's keep at it?
I think it went, the first initial, the tires in the road and the first time getting fired on of just being scared shitless to then within a week, the endorphins of what a fucking rush this is. Not to say I wasn't scared at first, when you're driving up. And there's a lot of wild stuff about that day, man. Have you seen anybody kind of in this world, the podcast world, or the book called The Terrorist Whisperer?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, look him up. So it's a
Okay.
while. I won't bore the story, but he's in America now. But he was Iraqi unit. So if you go back to that day, the reason we got brought up for that whole thing on the salt factory was to go rescue an Iraqi army unit that had been pinned down and was getting their ass here. And we pulled up, and there was the body, the decapitated, hanging from the wires there on Toledo Square. So, anyways, fast forward, till 2 years ago. This is 2004, and a couple of years ago, get put in touch with this guy and start talking. And he's been on a bunch of podcasts. He's got a book out, and he ended up became the youngest sergeant major in the Iraqi army,
Hamadi
and kind of one of
Jassim
the
is
early.
his name.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
and good friend of mine. And so as we're sitting there talking, and we met because it was kind of a friend of a friend knew him. It's like, hey, my book was about to come out. He's like, this guy may be able to make some introductions from you. And we had no idea. And then from talking, we figured out. I was listening to one of his podcasts one time, and he was describing that day and the reason he got promoted when basically the majority of the group that he was a part of got wiped out on Toledo Square in late summer 2004. And it was an American cavalry group that came in and rescued he and the remaining few of his guys. And so just freaking small world, man. So yeah, now he's a good friend of mine now. But yeah, that was the ones that we went in, and so we took a lot of pride. We unfortunately got there too late. There was a lot of dead Iraqi army, but we did save some. And who would have thought 15 years later, one of the guys we saved would be a good buddy of mine.
When you see that first body hanging, people don't understand, and I say this about first responders, law enforcement, things like that. People that don't do it don't understand. I want to know what you're thinking the first time you see that kind of stuff, because that's not a normal thing to see. That's not something that you go home, scrub off your brain, have a beer, and you're done with it. That stuff burns into
Yeah.
your memory. And so, what is it like when you're seeing this? Because as the book goes on, I really feel this way. As your book goes along and your deployments go along, things get worse and worse and worse. And it
Yeah.
almost seems like it's a never ending cycle of getting worse. So you're
Yeah.
really starting to see it now. You've had a taste of combat, you've been fired upon. Now you see this. What are you thinking?
So it's wild, man. Just to go back to that day and the effect that has on you. And so right before we got up there, uh, there was a tank platoon had been it's a different day, sorry, had been attached to us, and we were going up, and someone had come out from around the corner and popped some shots, and the freaking gunner in the or the TC or it was, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, freaking 50 cal on top of the M1, like caught the RPG guy and like literally cut him in half. And like that was one of the first times like seeing a dead body. Now that was like, wow, that's fucking badass. We just killed that dude as he was trying to, but then you see the other deal, this body hanging, and then it's a completely separate thing. It's one thing when you're killing them, all right, I hate to say it's cool, but you get it's like it's that rush of you're doing what you're supposed to do, but you see that, and then you're like, man, and I go back, and I hate to kind of go back to the quote you played at the beginning, which was badass, by the way. Uh,
Thank you.
just you think about like the will it takes to do that to another human being, and you start getting to some of the stuff we talk about in the second deployment of what the Shia in our area were doing the Sunni, drill bits and finding bodies tortured by drill bits, and it's the will that another human being can do that out of hatred for someone else or just out of pure will to make a point uh, is twofold. One, it's scary. Uh, it scares the shit out of you because you can't help but not imagine that being yourself if something you're put in the wrong situation. But then the complete flip side is you're just like, man, what if the world could use that same will for good? Then we wouldn't be over here having to do this kind of stuff we're doing right now, or like what's going on in the world today as we talk.
In your defense, though, when you say it's cool when we're doing it, when you see something like this, though, doesn't that kind of embolden your stance? Not that it's cool, but we're fighting animals here. We're fighting people that will reduce themselves to nothing to inflict harm and pain. And I don't want to say that it checks off the block in your brain like, okay, it's good that we're doing this, but doesn't it
Yeah.
embolden your stance a little bit? Like, yeah,
Oh,
this is why we're here,
yeah.
because of these guys.
Yeah, 100%. No, and look, you won't ever hear me apologize for any bad guy we killed. And unfortunately, there's collateral damage that goes along with that that you hear me talk about sometimes. And while that sucked and that hurt, maybe not hurt, I can't lie and say that, unfortunate, call it that. But the reason that shit happened was not us. It was because of, the evil, the evil that men do. You hear what I'm talking about? It
Absolutely.
does exist in the world. And you can't negotiate with evil. You have to, and that's why I say sound cool. I'm not trying to sound like some tough macho guy, like, oh, we killed people or go and crush evil. But the simple fact is, evil exists, and there's only one way to respond to evil in that world. And I was happy to be on the more often than not the giving than the receiving side.
In talking about that, do you ever worry in your brain while you're in the middle of this? Uh, you can't become them. You can fight them and put that evil down and go to extremes to put that evil down, but you can never, ever become them. And there's a very, very fine line to tread on that.
Oh, that's the you hear people talk about the rush, and it's like a drug. I've never done drugs, but I hear the rush is what people,
I hear.
But yeah, yeah. My friend says, yeah. But
Right.
no, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's 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 that fine line between the thrill of the rush or the addiction. And you're right. I mean, it's you see and do these things, and but we can get to some wild shit like stuff I saw the Iraqi army. That was our thing. If we ever detained somebody, we would question them. We'd be like, "Tell us what we want to hear. If not, we're going to give you the Iraqi army." And we have standards. And I remember sitting there one day, and this guy wouldn't give, and we knew he was a part and had detonated an IED that ended up killing some local civilians. And as it turns out, one of the local Iraqi army guys, it was his family that was, you know, family there can be, 15th cousin, however they do their thing, but he wouldn't talk, so we handed him over. And I mean, like, there was this line between us and the Iraqi gate, and I mean, just remember handing this guy off and like watching this guy take his Kevlar helmet off and just like literally bash this guy's head in. And uh, that's the line you're talking about because, that guy became one of them and was no better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that gets into some people's brains. I think that battle versus, I don't want to say good and evil in their brain, but that battle to ride that line tears them apart from top to bottom
Yeah.
because it becomes blurred sometimes. And I'm talking not just in military, not just in warfare. I think that line can get blurred where you are right there on it. I mean, let's be honest about it.
No, I look, man, I got a tattoo. I got a bunch of tattoos, but one of them is very symbolic, and people ask me which was, it's kind of a dark tattoo, and you know, my wife that I'm with now, we weren't together during all this, so she met this businessman and like finds out about this, other crazy part of my life, and hey, friend, it's on my back, so like, that's I always laugh. I'm like, interesting time. Like, well, there's a reason she probably saw me with my shirt off, the first time, and like, hey, what's this tattoo mean? And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is probably not the right time for us to have that
Did you
discussion.
lie? Be honest right now. Did you lie that first time?
No,
Okay. All right.
no,
All
no.
right.
I just, but coming back to it is, the basic premise behind it is she was like, what does it mean? And I'm like, it's symbolic of the things that I've done and I know I'm capable of. but it's also my reminder that I never want to be that man again and that kind of full of hate again. Uh, and that was just my way of kind of coming to terms with it.
Going back into Iraq and being over there, you're finally afforded some leave. You come back.
Mhm.
We can say that you and Chrissy are not on the best of terms. As a matter of fact, I think that she has said a divorce, correct? You've been thinking that, well, you compartmentalize that, but you're thinking that the whole time you're there, right? That there is
Yeah.
a definite divorce in the future.
Yeah, she had told me, this isn't going to work out between us. I'm not going to do this while you're gone. You got enough other stuff going on, but let's start making plans for when you get back because we're going to get a divorce.
And so I don't really want to talk whether that got to you, because I think in it had to have in some way. But you come back on leave, you go home. I think it's hilarious what your mom says. She asks if she can buy you a 6-pack of beer, take you to a strip club,
I told you she's the
whatever,
best, man.
whatever it may be
Yeah,
that you need. And you say, look, I just want to be with family, friends. I just want to kind of put that, I guess you would say, compartmentalize what's going on over there and take this in while I'm here and kind of focus
yeah,
on this. So you do it, you go out with your friends, you have a friend that likes to talk loud, gets on a microphone, says that you're a war hero, and that if there's not a drink in front of you from every patron in the bar, that he's going to kick each and every one of their asses. You start getting drinks all night long. You have a good time. You have started to decompress from everything that's going on over there. Are you feeling anything? This is going to be kind of a two-part question. Are you feeling anything that you felt looking back on it now during or after that second deployment? Do you feel any of those feelings right now on this first one while you're on leave?
no.
Nothing.
As in, you talk about comparing how I felt on leave compared to when I came back after the second one.
Either during,
Yeah,
because we're going to
yeah,
talk about it, but during that second deployment, I think things took a real change. Are you
yeah,
seeing
yeah.
any, even like a microcosm of any of those things right now, or are we completely, I guess you would say, good right now?
I'm good because a couple of things. One, I took an immense. Now it was a lot of shit we were going through, uh, but I took an immense amount of pride in what we were doing, and really felt like we were making a difference. We were fighting the Al Qaeda in Iraq guys. Oftentimes, these weren't Iraqis that we were killing; they were foreign fighters from other countries. And again, people sometimes got to go back. This is a long time ago. So one of the early things is let's fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them here. And I really felt like that's what we were doing. And so yeah, I mean, I had a lot going on to deal with. It was easy. Like the break to decompress, as you called it, was perfect. Like it was decompressing. The Chrissy stuff, straight up, man, that's in the box, like we talked about. It's pushed away. Not going to think about it. That's just what I do. So I was good. I was good until up, which I think I know what you're going to bring up next. I was all good until then.
So you're doing fine on this. Nothing that you're
Yeah,
feeling. Your aunt and uncle set you down, and they tell you you're going
yeah.
to come over and see us. You say, "Well, if I got time." They said, "No, you're going to make time and come over here." You knew something was important.
The background behind that is I went up to Birmingham from Florida to see all my college buddies, and my aunt lived in Montgomery, and my uncle lived down in Dothan, and he was a surgeon down in Dothan. And she said, "Hey, Scott's up in Montgomery visiting me. We want you to come by on your way back to Florida." And it was like an hour out of my way total. And the reason I told them I couldn't make it, I said it was bad weather. That I was so hungover from the night before that, yeah. And then she said, she's like, "No, you're coming down. You're coming down tonight."
So you go over and you find out they set you down, they talk to you, and they tell you your mother has a brain aneurysm. And like I
Yeah, she
said,
had one.
as you go through this book, it gets worse and worse and worse. So they set you down, they tell you this. What are you thinking?
Kind of probably what you're like, you know, like, man, who did I piss off type deal. I got this personal relationship going, and while yeah, I'm incredibly proud of what I'm doing over there. It's not easy. This was supposed to be my break from that. And then I come home and instead it's, tenfold, just on a personal level of what I'm going through. Yeah, that was probably the immediate reaction, but then it just went into, all right, so what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do? And so, yeah, so I got my leave extended and was able to, to be there for the surgery. And, and they told me, and that's what's, and again, it just speaks volumes to my mom, that she'd sat there and spent, I'd been home a week and a half at that point, but she refused to tell me because she said, I know you, in her eyes, in her mind, he has enough going on in the world right now. He doesn't need to worry about me. And it was my aunt and uncle that intervened and like, no, Vicky, he not only deserves to know, he needs to know, kind of just in case things went south when I went back. So yeah, stayed there and was there for the surgery, and fortunately everything came out okay. They caught it, before it ruptured.
You see her and you a lot? Because it kind of sounds like the same person.
It's we are we are as much opposite as we are alike, if that makes sense. Again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. She is just this incredibly. Uh, we both kind of had two different things that we wanted out of life, but I think the common denominator between us is, and she won't admit it, but I always tell her, I'm like, you always talk about like, why am I wired the way I am, and why have I, and I got it from having you as an example, just this incredible resiliency of, she always tells me like all these things that I went through in life, and I turn it around and remind her of some of the things that I know she's been through in life, and yet she continues to have a positive attitude and move forward and always try to be, put others before herself. So again, those are that's the me and her, or the her and me, I should say.
I think more of it whenever you say that, when she says you already have enough on your plate, she's not going to burn you with it. It almost kind of sounds like what you said about telling Chrissy or other people, not going to put it on your plate. It's on mine.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it and I'll figure it out on my own.
Yeah. Where do you think I
And
got it from?
yeah.
Yeah.
And you almost, I mean, you really almost can't fault you for it. It's in almost your DNA.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. And I always give her a hard time. Like I go back, I try to remind her of stuff like that. And then she always like, no, you're nothing like me. Mom, you're so much stronger. All crap mom says. And I always remind her, I'm like, Mom, remember back when I was a teenager one time and you're just like, I would be snapping, being a teenager and arguing back with you. And you would be like, oh, my perfect boy who's so smart, who never does anything wrong. Then you would just look at me and be like, where do you get this sarcastic attitude from? I'm like, oh, shit, right here in front of me. You just did it. So, yeah, man, she's the best.
Now, there's a second part to this story. Your aunt and uncle also tell you that you're going to make one more trip while you're extending out your leave, that they
Yeah.
have points on their airline miles, and that you are going to go see Chrissy and you're going to work this out. Now, it's compartmentalized. So you've got to be thinking right then, like, it's not going to work. I have stuff to do, but you go do it anyway. Now, here's where it gets crazy for me, that I've got to understand. What did you two say to each other to do 180 degree? Because divorce was on the table. She said, I cannot do this. You are literally at the end of your leave heading back to do the same thing in the same country. What could you possibly have said to each other to rekindle the feelings?
There was nothing said. I think it was when all that came up with my mom, it just caused the instant, it's human nature. Like all of a sudden our problems go away. And, and again, we had something good. And so everything that when then it came to the concern for my mom, concern for me. Uh, so it was more of, and when I went back out there, it was look, we weren't naive. We didn't go back and like everything's forgotten. We're hunky dory. Life is great. It was, what, this is worth giving it a shot when I get back. That was kind of the uh, agreement.
You get done with leave, you head back over. When you get back over, your friend Adam's killed.
Yeah.
Now, this is where, and tell me if I'm wrong, but in the book, this is where I think things took their turn right then.
I think that was, I had known other people that had been killed, not well, but the first time, like having someone very close to you. I mean, heck, Cole, his middle name is Adam. Uh, that was when, it's very easy to, you don't realize that at the time, but if you, in hindsight, you look back and kind of say, like when was the beginning? Like everything on the first is like all this pride in what we were doing, and everything was great. And we a mission, an enemy to fight back at, and it was the end of that deployment, and this culmination. There should be a celebration, and then it ends with this shitty event, losing a great friend, an incredible man. And then I think it's safe to say that was the peak. And over my remaining time in the military was a steady and sometimes drastic fall.
And it's interesting that you say that's where the peak should have been. And it reminds me of another story that you told in there when you guys first get into country and you're being trained. And I think it's on the first deployment where these guys are going out on their last patrol and they get killed.
That was the second deployment.
That was the second deployment when you got there.
Yeah.
But I look at that and I look at your friend Adam. That's your peak and everything's ending and we're supposed to be going home and this is all. And then this happens. Then you come back on the second deployment. These guys are supposed to be home. They're on their last patrol and they're killed. And again, you see life is fleeting. It's not waiting around for anybody. And there's nothing that you're going to do to stop what's going to happen.
Yeah, you just sort of come to and that's, like that was, to this day, that's one of the things, there's just a couple of things that always like stick out to me. Lots and lots of horrible things, but like some that are just a lot have been able to kind of come to grips with. But like that's one that it's really wild. About 6 months ago, was on a different podcast, and this guy reached out to me. And again, when I say that unit, like their last patrol, like you do the left seat, right seat rides. The first week they're in control. A couple of us ride with them. The second week, it's most of us and a few of them. Like the majority of their unit had packed up back in Kuwait. These dudes, there was maybe, 8, 10 of them left across the different companies spread out, kind of 2 guys with each company, 2 or 3 guys. And it was our engineer company, and it was the engineer company that was leaving. And like on the way home from the last mission, hit and lose a couple of guys. And a guy heard me on a different podcast and reached out to me, and I remember meeting him. He's like, "You may not remember this. We met," and I did. And as it turned out, like one of those guys that was killed was one of his best friends, and he was like, "Do you know someone that can tell me the story? Because all we know, like we were in Kuwait, like once you leave, you don't find out all the details. You just, like they were killed by an EFP. That's all we ever knew, and we knew it was around this area. So man, it was just gut wrenching one night. So I got my buddy who had been the engineer company commander, who's just an awesome dude and was willing to talk about it, and connected these guys via text. And I'm like, all right, y'all can drop me, have a separate conversation, and they just started going and like basically relived that whole thing. 2007, so this was 2020, 13 years after. And as I hear this guy, I was just like, he was all kind of tore up, but he's like, I know now. 13 years later, I know what happened to my buddy. So yeah, it's just a shitty deal, man.
I think though the good thing that you get from it is closure for that guy. I think that's what
no doubt.
He can finally kind of close that chapter. And I think you speak about that a lot in the book of kind of closing that chapter or coming to terms with it and knowing what really happened. I want to talk about, before we go into the redeployment, but I want to talk about leading up to it, where you are taking over as company commander. First, you're acting company commander. Then you actually are asked to take over the company. But you're training these guys. You're with them all the time. You have, by all stretch of the imagination, you have a fantastic unit that's working for you. The men love each other. They love the command. They love the non-commissioned officers. Everyone seems to be gelling. This is like the unit. If you want to go somewhere with them, this is the unit to be. Would you agree with that?
we had an incredibly unique situation of, you know, for a conventional Army unit to see the amount of combat that we saw that first deployment. And not all of it was on a grand scale of, say, a Fallujah or a Sadr City, but just the day in, day out. I don't think anything came close to what was on Haifa Street that year we were there. So yeah, you had this very, refined and set of skills with conventional army that was, I think, something to be envied by a lot. With that comes the camaraderie. And then so we come back, and I'm a platoon leader in Alpha Company, and they send me over to be the XO of Charlie Company. Well, remember when I first got there, I was going to be a platoon leader in Charlie Company, so I already knew the guys. We were on the same fob. We worked together day in and day out, so there was a level of trust. My first sergeant had been the platoon sergeant. He was the acting first sergeant at first. Uh, he had been the platoon sergeant for third platoon Charlie Company. So it's like, all right, our leadership is now two dudes that went through the same shit we did this first deployment. We know them, they respect us. And while there is a lot of guys came back, you come back from a deployment, dudes scattered, but kind of the core of that 135 man mechanized infantry unit, kind of the core 50, 60 that remained when we got back was the leadership and all the E6s, E7s, and E5s. It was all the younger guys who took off. So it just made this transition of we got new soldiers in. We had our way. It worked. Arrogant. I would say cocky is a better way to, because we had kind of been there and done that and done it well. Uh, you know, to say that it's the what every other unit should strive to be. I don't know. Some people say that. I'll just say that I wouldn't trade that group of men. I mean, there's a reason I gave up and withdrew my SFAS packet. Was an opportunity to spend another deployment with that man once they offered me command.
So I think this is where you talked about that's where the peak should have been at the end of that last deployment. But I feel like in the book, in your brain right now, this is where the peak's kind of coming. You've got the perfect
Yes,
company. This is your peak.
that's
Um,
why I said in hindsight you would say the other, but you're absolutely right.
right. So when you talk about the peak, Chrissy's back in your life. You've got the perfect unit. Your guys are getting along. You get over there, and the big thing is the EFPs and IEDs. You really start talking about them here,
Yeah,
and you talk about faceless killers over there because they're setting these things, getting away. And I think at one point in the book you talked about you wish maybe sometimes it seemed crazy, but that you could talk to these guys and go, "How did you pull this off? How did you get away with this?" And
yeah,
so when you come back over with all this gusto, because I think that's what it is. You get done with the first deployment, you come back, you guys, like I said, have a great unit, everything's going great. You come back over, you got this gusto, and then you see this. And this time around, there's really no tangible wins. You talk about tangible wins on this one. Um,
mhm,
so on this deployment, we're talking about a lot about you feel like it's a kind of a different kind of battle. I think at one point in the book you say that you would have given anything to have the kind of battle that you had before, but this one's kind of
yeah,
no tangible wins. Nothing's going on. Now you have to make kind of your first command decision, and that is to reassign first platoon. You decide
yeah,
because that's kind of your new guys. It's got some senior NCO leadership, but this is kind of the first time that you see people. I don't know if I'd use the word are questioning your command, but they're definitely looking at you from a different angle once you make this decision. And so this is where I want to start talking about decisions. And I feel like this is where decisions in your life started kind of taking a turn on you. So let's talk about this one first of why you chose that and what you did. Now, you describe in the book that you don't need as command to explain every decision that you make, but you felt a little weird about this decision. Not necessarily weird, but you definitely felt this decision.
yeah. Because I knew what the optics were going to be. So I talked to you about earlier about how that kind of core group of 50, 60 guys that we had left. So we made the decision we built up third platoon first. And then, so we kind of took the NCOs that we had, uh, the majority of them were in second and third platoon. And then the few remaining ones at the E6, we had like a E6, I think that's platoon sergeant, and they were in first platoon with just a couple of guys. So we built up third platoon first, and just sort of that core leadership were a couple of the studs from the first deployment. There was always the fact that my first sergeant had come from third platoon, that we looked out for them. Some of the guys were, uh, the nice way to put it, they could be a pain in my ass, but damn, they were good at their job. So there was a sense of favoritism there. Then we built up second platoon. They had some rock stars there. One of the guys, Terry Prater, who, as we'll get to, ended up being one of the guys we lost. He had won the Silver Star first deployment. So I say that the so we built up second and third platoon, and then first platoon was kind of the one that, as we got near deployment, any new soldiers we got all went to first platoon. So it sort of became somebody would show up before, hey, we think you're a better fit for third, you're a better fit for second. At the end, it was like, oh, you just go to first platoon. And then we ended up getting this freaking stud platoon leader, a guy named Josh Norton. And again, the NCOs were awesome as well. The soldiers were awesome, but right or wrong, the optic was going to be, uh, because there were more new guys in first platoon than there were in second, that the CO and first sergeant were going to keep second and third platoon because that was their boys, and they were going to push first platoon off. And to me, my mind was, that old rule: whenever you're asked to give up a unit and detach someone, you're supposed to give up your best. And while all three had their own traits that made them the best at one particular thing, I truly felt like, as a whole, and a lot of it had to do with the leadership of Norton, the three platoon leaders I had, and one of the other guys was a stud also, but Norton was just this no nonsense. And I know when you go to an environment like that, sometimes the other company may kind of take advantage of you. And while the other guy may have been a stud, he was a go-getter and would say yes to everything. And Norton was the kind of guy that wouldn't be afraid to tell another commander, like, "Sir, this is bullshit. You're taking advantage of us." Uh, so I just felt like that platoon had the temperament, the leadership that would be most successful. If I sent one of the other groups, they would be a pain in the ass for that group I sent them to. And when they weren't being a pain in the ass to them, they would be back at my barracks being a pain in the ass to us, telling us, "Why the fuck did you send us over there with these ship bags?" Which they weren't. They were a great unit. So yeah, I felt it was important to, you're right, you don't got to explain everything, but something as big and key as that, I knew it wasn't going to be received well. And I knew no matter what I said, their mind was kind of already made up, but I was damn sure going to say my piece.
Do you see anyone after the decision's made? Do you see that it was what you thought it was going to be, or did it quickly pass over?
I think some of it lingered with some of the soldiers for a long time. I think there's some to this day, and not that I think, I know. I mean, there's still see some stuff on social media of like, you guys weren't even part of Legion, you were attached to somebody else, or you guys kicked us to the curb. There's always going to be a few of those, and that's part of it. That comes with the job. And not necessarily directed at me. Sometimes just more directed at the unit leadership as a whole, and that's fine if they want to direct it at me. I'm okay with that. As a whole, I think the majority of it passed pretty quick. They actually, once they kind of got over the kicking the balls part of it, they liked the unit they got assigned to. They actually got more, you know, true contact, more similar to Hyper Street than we did. Now, eventually they got moved up and back to us, not with Legion. They got moved to, we were Bravo Company 1-8. They got moved to Delta Company 1-8. Yeah, it passed.
So as we move on, let's talk about FOB. I think it's called Rustamaya.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you find out you're not going to be living so well. You're going to be moved out into some forward areas. You're going to lose maybe internet, some electricity, some nice sleeping. But the way it's going to be broken up is a couple days out, couple days back in to rest, kind of get cleaned back up, and then go back out. Are you seeing anything different now? Is there anything that you're like, okay, this is a little like the first one, or are you still kind of like, what are we doing here?
No, it was completely different, man. It was, so we get there, November 2006. We leave in October, Kuwait a couple of weeks, get in country in November, and then as soon as we get there, so you get there in November, you're going to miss a Thanksgiving and a Christmas because 12-month
Right.
deployment. As soon as we get there, announce the surge. So, all right, you're now 3 extra months. So now you're going to miss 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases. Oh, hey, now give up one of your companies or one of your platoons to go to somebody else. Uh, and oh, by the way, the mission now is not go out and targeted operations like we had that first deployment. It's 24/7 presence in sector. So not only did we rarely go out as a company, you rarely went out as a full platoon. All platoons were split up into small groups, and we're coming into this area that you're hearing about the rise of EFPs and this sniper threat. Talking to the unit before us, like, hey, we're trying to hear like hyperstreet stories. They're like, man, that shit never happens here. No one ever comes out and fights you. They just get blown up. And more and more intel coming about that EFPs are just going to get worse and worse. So then you got to go and, sell that turd to your men of, yeah, we're in the most heavily, EFP'd area in all of Iraq. It's going to get worse. And, oh, by the way, those hour and a half missions we used to do on Haifa Street way back when, and maybe they would turn into longer if we got in a big firefight. No, now I want you to go drive around for 8 hours, split your platoon up, go drive around, and we got to have 24/7 presence in sector. So,
So that raises, I mean, you're out on 1 hour. Yes, there was lots of fighting and stuff, but you're out for 8 hours with them just setting out explosives, no hand to hand fighting, no, not hand to hand, no in your face fighting where you guys are on the ground. It's just explosives going off. That's got to raise the level of everyone. Like, what the hell are we doing?
yeah.
And so,
And then like, all right, so you got all this going on. So they're coming back to the Five Rest of Maya. Five Rest of Maya was great. Everyone gets settled, and then it's like, okay, you're going to leave Five Rest of Maya, and you're going to go live out amongst the people. So, and this is all going down. Again, from November to January, like this all happens that quick. So,
that's an awesome first go at it as being a company commander. Your first couple months being a company commander in a war zone, because no matter how much syrup you pour on that shit, you're not making pancakes out of what's going on.
yeah, and I think, if anything, uh, look, man, you got the job. That's, it comes with it. You get your orders. We all got orders. You go and sell it. And some of it was just, the kind of, we all have our own leadership style, and I never, I think it's okay that you can disagree with what the people, I mean, even the business world today, people are like, you know what, we're going to get behind closed doors and we're going to yell and holler, but we come out, we're going to be on a united front. And I'm like, people are going to see right through that shit. And, back to the example I gave earlier about, hey, go check out this car. It looks like a car bomb. Go verify. Like, my men would look at me like I was a fucking idiot if I was like, guys, we have our orders. We're going to do this. So yeah, so no, I mean, I say that like, guys, look, these are orders. I don't like it any more than you do. I didn't try to polish that turd, but I'm like, we are going to do it. It's our job. When we all raised our right hand and volunteered to go do this, none of us had a gun put to our head to put over here. You can't have it both ways. You can't, relish in the good and how exciting Haifa Street was, but now all of a sudden, when the mission, and the situation changes, then all of a sudden, oh, this is fucked up. The army's screwing me. These people don't know what. No, you can't. And I had that conversation with them. You know, did they all like it? No. Did I believe in what we were doing? No. But I think there was at least a level set of honesty uh, amongst the men, and it didn't make the mission of what we were doing any easier, but at least maybe uh, easier to put up with. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the way that it almost has to be done over there. I mean, there's not a lot of time to you bring up the business world and we're going to get behind the doors and we're going to mesh this out and then we're going to come out and be a united front. It's a whole different world. There's not time for that bullshit. There's a mission at hand, whether that mission be boring, exciting, whatever it may be. It's a different kind of world. There's none of this. We're going to just go and go and go until we figure out what our differences are. It's get the mission done and get it done now.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes us to where everything to me in the book fell apart. March 14th.
15th.
I
guess
sorry,
it starts on the 14th.
starts
Yeah.
on the 14th, goes into the 15th.
Yeah.
I want you to just walk through this story. I don't want to ask a lot of questions right up front. I just want you, because I think it's best if you explain the whole thing, what you're out doing. And it goes back to that tangible win in what you're going to talk about,
Yeah.
what you were doing. And then just walk us through the entire from the 14th into the 15th.
Yeah. So we were in an area, eastern Baghdad. Our patrol base was out in the outskirts of Sadr City, and we had gone to an area, I think it was called Fob Warhorse before, and that was the old 2-5 cab back from 2004, the Sadr City uprising back in April. Uh, so anyways, I say that, there's a tremendous amount of fighting, obviously. Then Americans couldn't go into Sadr City after that. And the area we were living in, that fob, after that deployment in early '05, no Americans had been at it for over a year. And no Americans have patrolled up in that area for over a year. But as part of the surge, we pushed out further. And because of the experience that we had that first deployment, my battalion command, our leadership wanted to put us up out kind of at the forefront, tip of the spear, whatever you want to call it. Uh, so as it turns out, and again, you find some of the stuff out in hindsight. The area we went into was kind of, call it the primary, you know, supply road, whatever, for a lot of the EFPs that came into all of Baghdad. They were more predominant on the Shia side just because of the Iranian influence and the technology and where they learned that. And we got put up in an area that when we got up there, talked to a few of the locals. They're like, "Hey, we're cool with you guys here. You guys stay in this little area right around your base. You won't have any issues. If you go up that road, past this other road," he's like, "that's where all the bad guys are. That's where they make all the bombs." And so we didn't at first because we kind of had to get the lay of the land. And then early March, we started pushing further and further north, and then got intel of, uh, there was this site that supposedly they had a bunch of stuff buried. And we get up there and start digging around, and it turns out it's a mosque, which we usually left mosque alone, but that was not part of the intel that we'd given. So that went over like a fart in church. So soon after that, the EFPs really increased in our area significantly. So that's early March. And I give that context because it kind of steps, when I say there was a quick escalation of things, there had been a kind of steady contact up to that point. But once we went up past that road, uh, is when things really hit the fan right after that. So the next week, March 14th, we get a call that one of the few times we did get to go do a targeted op, that a guy there kind of close to our FOB, weapons runner, did a lot with the Iranians, that he was in this area. So they sent us out as a company. So it was a weird deal. So my third platoon was back at Rustamaya refitting. So I had my second platoon with me, had my tank platoon with me, and then I actually got a platoon from Charlie Company that had a patrol base out close to us. They came over, so went cordon operation and just started, mechanized infantry, man. We're not SEALs or Delta coming in little bursts, fast roping in. Everybody and their brother hears this, so we just block off this huge area, and it's just house by house going through it. And this started on the 14th, probably about, I don't know, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night or so. Can't really remember. But you can imagine going through all these houses. It just went on and on. And I say that, so the next morning we had a mission with the Iraqi army that had to have two platoons. So third platoon was refitting. They were going to come back out the next day, do this mission with second platoon, which was basically a glorified photo op of, look at the American forces out there working with the Iraqis. It was doing a, traffic control point, some bullshit like that. And, again, I say bullshit. That was the mission. We didn't always like it, but that was the mission. And we may not like it, but we're going to do our job. But as the night goes on and on and on, I'm out with second platoon. And so a little after midnight, I requested relief from that mission the next morning and was told no, that we had to be there, uh, I'm like, hey, we still haven't found this guy. We're going to be out here all night. Why can't one platoon do it? Like, no, we got to have two platoons. That's what we told them. So this goes on several more hours, and basically every hour on the hour, I ask, uh, and I keep getting denied. And so we finally get this guy. We actually found the target. I don't know, 3:30, 4 in the morning. Take him back up to our patrol base up there at Legion Base, we called it. And at that point, I'm told that, okay, you guys have been out all night, but we can't just have one platoon. So send all of second platoon back with the detainee, and then half of them can go back out with third platoon for the mission with the Iraqi army. And so second platoon uh, come back to 5. They go back to the base, and this is all 5:30, 6 in the morning, and take the prisoner back, do all the paperwork with that, and then one section, so it's 2 Bradleys and 2 Humvees from second platoon. They're coming back out because they need to refit and do some things. And there was this weird coordination going on because we had planned the mission of third platoon meeting us with second platoon. So we're like, all right, let's get second platoon back out to the base, let them refit, and then we'll send third platoon out. And so yeah, anyways, point being, second platoon is coming back out. Now, let me step back because I'm sure you're going to bring it up, and I didn't purposely leave it out. As we were going that morning with all of second platoon to drop off the detainee, I was going with them, and we were going to leave a few of their guys back to sleep. Something happened with third platoon. There was a mix-up on. I don't want to like call anybody out, but it wasn't any of my studs. I'll say that someone had kind of dropped the ball on something, and I was like, "Hey, I got to figure this shit out." So I got out. I was just like, Prater, I got to stay here, and got out. And I was like, "Want me to get Arnold?" He was like, "Yeah, get Arnold back in here." So I was like, "Arnold, get your ass in here. Take my spot." So I go back in, get on the radio, get everything kind of hashed out with third platoon, make sure they're set on where they have to meet up with second platoon later, and then like, all right, cool. I got 30 minutes, going to lay down, catch a quick nap, been up all night. I mean, everybody, other guys that have been up more than me and didn't get a chance to sleep. So that was when second platoon was coming back out to meet up with us, and got hit by an EFP, the lead Bradley. So they had a, Bradley, Humvee, Bradley. And, lead Bradley struck by an EFP, and it was actually real close to Alpha Company's patrol base on a road, ironically called Dead Girl Road. And I never heard I heard multiple stories of the background behind that, but it was kind of ominous. And no one was hurt, disabled the Bradley, and they had this other dumb thing. You hear about sensitive site exploitation. Whether it's on target, getting whatever information you can from a target site. But again, this is kind of early on in the EFP. They'd been around. It wasn't a new technology, but just really the increase. And so there was this thing of whenever there was any kind of IED attack, they wanted us to go out and take pictures and measure the blast radius on the ground. And they could take it based off how the blast radius was, they could determine if it was orbital 360 IED floating everywhere, or the shape charge projectile from an EFP. And again, back to like, yeah, guys, you just got blown up by something. Now I want you to get out and go take pictures of it. Was another, probably harder sell than driving around for 8 hours waiting to get blown up. So kind of my guidance to my guys was, guys, we're supposed to, this is our orders are to do this. The orders also say, if the situation dictates and allows for it. And I'm not going to be on every patrol because we're scattered. And so my guidance is the senior leader on the ground makes the call. And, my expectation is that more often than not, because of where we're at, that you're going to say, oh, the situation just didn't make sense. We felt at risk. We didn't take pictures. Like, but every now and then we have to, we can't completely not do it. Someone's going to catch on. And so whatever this day, the call was made to, they had, I mean, the vehicle was disabled, so they had to get out anyways. And they said, while we're, since we're out, someone snap a couple of pictures. And so they were more focused on the recovery piece at first. And when they got out, there were 6 guys on the ground. And this was a coordinated attack. You You always look for secondary devices. We found them more than we didn't find them, and unfortunately, this day we didn't. So the secondary device, which was not an EFP, it was a conventional IED. Think Claymore. It was a ball-bearing IED designed for troops on the ground to do exactly what it did. So that detonated and hit the 6 men on the ground. Four were killed instantly. Staff Sergeant Terry Prater, Sergeant Emerson Brand, Staff Sergeant Blake Harris, and Specialist Jimmy Arnold that I mentioned earlier. And then two guys, Sergeant Ryan Green, and then our medic, Sergeant Nicholas Leitner, suffered catastrophic injuries. Green was a amputee, and Leitner had significant, these tiny little ball bearings. What they do to the body is devastating. So yeah, four guys, two injured.
Here's the big thing that I took from it was you're woken up, right? You're taking your little nap. You're woken up and
Yeah.
they say, "Hey, we were hit. Everyone's okay." I just wanted to kind of update you on it. So you kind of are relaxed, go back, and then I guess almost immediately they come back in. Well, never mind.
Yeah.
Not everyone's okay. We took a secondary blast. 4 were killed instantly. And you
No,
find
we don't
out,
know. They don't tell me that. They don't tell me any are killed. They just said people are hurt.
okay,
That's all I know. We have injuries. Yeah.
but then Charles Irwin, right?
Charlie Irwin. Yep.
Yeah. So he uses your name over the radio and says he's going to call
Yeah.
you. He calls you and starts kind of apprising you of the situation. Um, does he tell you any more while he's talking to you?
No. So he was the executive officer at Alpha Company, and again, it happened right in front of their fob. And again, we didn't have many guys out there, and as you can imagine, it was kind of a shit show. The guys I was talking to on the net on my end, uh, and you kind of said like, I heard, we have multiple wounded, and then like we have a KIA, and again, understandably so, the guy I'm talking to is kind of a mess, and it's like don't say any names over the net. Uh, and then the Alpha Company guys got out there and kind of took over, and then they were actually closer to not Fob Rustamaya to Fob Loyalty, which was the brigade headquarters, and so they took them there. And then, like as they were pulling in at that point, they kind of knew who was who, and so that's when Charlie came over the net and just, it was no Legion 5, this is Commando 6. It was, hey, so Charlie and I were platoon leaders together that first deployment on Haifa Street. Very close friends. Ironically, still very close friends to this day. Even more ironically, his wife is an OBGYN and they're in Fort Worth and delivered my last three children. So very,
That
very close people to me.
yeah, that is
Uh,
that's amazing. That it.
yeah, so
I mean,
it's,
it shows you what a small world it is, and not to get in the middle of the story, but to show you like what a small world this is. While all this is going on, though, I want to talk about Kuhn, um, and
yeah,
the heroic efforts that he did that night, because I want to talk about later on not only
yeah,
what happened to him, but what he came to talk to you about. So you have
yeah.
two injured, you have 4 dead, 4 KIA. Kuhn, can you kind of tell his side of it? And the reason I don't want to tell any part of this, because I want it to come from you, because I think it's a little more real when it comes out of you instead of me just pointing out talking points in the
Yeah,
book.
no, it's yeah. So community, and again, I wasn't there, so I'm basing this off of what others. So again, the majority of the guys, the guy to the Humvee was really all the dismounts. There was only a couple of gunners and drivers left, and so when that went off, and there's multiple, depending on who you ask, and again, it's the whole cliche fog of war. Some people were saying, uh, some bad guys opened up, so they were under small arms fire as soon as this happened. Other people say there was nothing. Again, I don't know. I wasn't there, but what I was told is that they were under fire, and Kuhn jumped out of the gunner seat and the gunner's hatch and in a Humvee, and ran out there and kind of quickly realized there was nothing you could do for the floor, but put tourniquets on Sergeant Green, Sergeant Leitner, and so the reason they lived, albeit temporarily, was kind of for what he did with no one else Imagine that scene. This thing goes off. There's not a whole lot of guys left. They're either in Bradley's or it's you, and you run out by yourself and go and do that and kind of held down the fort and gave them medical aid till the Alpha Company guys showed up.
When all this is happening, you're like we talked about, you're being apprised of it and everything. You to me took good points from it. You said you got 2 injured. Yes, that's a bad thing. Yes, 4 KIA, but you tried to focus on the positive of 2 being injured, 2 that you could still possibly get in touch with, find out what happened, talk to them, kind of work them through it. And then, of course, you have Kuhn that's also there, who has his struggles later on. Can we talk about the first time? Well, first I want to talk about you and the first sergeant in the temporary morgue. This was a huge kind of point in the book, that 2 men who tried to bottle it up the whole time couldn't do it anymore. It just exploded there.
Actually, it was at that point I still was. It was the first time, and again, you got man, first sergeant Orlando Garcia. I mean, that dude. You know, fast forward many years. One of the best men in my wedding. People talk about
Right.
brotherhood. I mean, like, it's unbelievable what me and that man have, and uh, just the rock, man. It's like anything. Sometimes, you're the commander, you get the credit for this great unit, and you'll never once hear me like the unit was built around that dude, and and I don't say that to be humble. I mean, sure, I played a part, maybe, but what we had was because of that man. And anybody in Legion would tell you that, and they try to say it was me. I would tell you they're lying because they're trying to kiss my ass or something. And he was an emotional guy, but he was just a rock for the men. And when we went in there to see the bodies, uh, it was, and again, it's just dichotomy of just thought and numbness, clarity, like I remember it, like it happened, like many of those experiences, like it happened this morning, of him just losing it, and just put his head on my chest and just started crying. And as painful and sad as that moment was, there was almost this feeling of like, finally for once
You can be the
I'm there for
strength.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was always there, and it's and that's selfish to think of it that way, and I don't mean it as like taking advantage of that moment. I think you get what I'm saying,
Yeah, no,
but
absolutely.
it's just a yeah, it so yeah, so then that was when he he's got this horrible nosebleed while he was crying, and so like he came off from me, and like I mean I'm just like covered in blood like all over my shirt. So we leave there, and he goes to get cleaned up, and I don't give a shit. So I went to the chow hall and wasn't even. I mean, again, obviously I'm just numb, and so yeah, so that was when the guy came and kind of realized. I mean, at this point, word had spread around the base. We're back at Ruston Maya, what was going on, and it didn't take long to figure out, who I was, and uh, so yeah, it was. So the guy came up, that other NCO. I don't know who it was, different unit, but was just amazingly awesome in how he handled that situation. But
By
yeah,
telling
so
you
I
he'll
left
get
and
you
went back to my
another
room.
shirt.
Yeah, he was just like, hey sir, let me go. Why don't I come get you back here? Let me go get you something else. And I kind of looked down, and then it all came to, and I'm like, I appreciate it, but I'll just get out of here.
So Kuhn, when all this happens, he comes to you later on because you find out not from him personally, but from some other men that he's maybe not doing as well as he is portraying outwardly.
Yeah, so there's that. Again, when he's having a tough time with things, and you forget the weekend before we deployed, we had the unfortunate alcohol-related incident and lost a soldier. And the
Absolutely.
reason that kid lived long enough for his parents to drive down from Colorado and pull the plug was Coon gave him mouth to mouth and kept him alive until the parents got there. So when I, I heard he was struggling, with what had happened that day, everybody was in their own way. And at this point, uh, you know, the forward died. 3 days later, Sergeant Green died. We had the memorial service for the 5 guys. We get together, we laugh, cry. That was on March 20th. but hey, we still got Doc Leitner, to rally around. Well, then the next day we get the call that he died after making it all the way back to the States. So then you got Coon to kind of to hang on to, and so yeah, it was a couple of weeks after that is when I called him into my room and just reminded him and said, I know anything I say is, just going to be words at this point, but I hope as time goes on, you you realize that three families got an opportunity to spend last moments with their boy, and in our line of work, that's not something that a lot of people get. And while it doesn't change anything in what you feel right now, I just hope in time that you realize that what you've done for those three families is more than most people will ever accomplish in a lifetime, and that's something they'll always cherish and hold on to. And yeah, that was what I said.
And then the unthinkable happens. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it, because you see this, you see what he's going through, you talk to him, tell him to hold his head high, all this, and then the unthinkable happens to him. And it happens to him, I think, in probably the worst way it can. Because the four guys that are KIA are out there. It's on a mission. Not everyone was around. This one was very up close and personal with you. And so
Yeah.
I is the mind starting to go dark by now? I mean, you're numb. Are you starting to go dark where you're just like, when the fuck does all this end? Are you starting to
That
think that
was
yet?
no, that was yeah, no, that was it's a very clear like when the other stuff was incredibly difficult. I won't discount it in any way. It was a struggle. I guess kind of where I hit my internal breaking point, which again I compartmentalized,
Right.
was was that, and not just because of you know it's not so, and again I don't say it like I'm not trying to like intentionally tell you this some heartbreaking story, but when I'm like come up with the worst like someone if you can show me a more painful way to go through an experience like this, I want to see it because to lose that many at once, to have a couple to hang on to, and then them die in subsequent days, and then the hero to him die and to how he died, and then
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
the person.
I don't want to bring it up, but can you tell the story of what happened there?
So was out on a mission again. I wasn't on. It was one of the smaller, half a platoon patrols out there, and he was in the gunner seat in the Humvee. He's a big kid, like 6'5", 6'6", and leaned out over, was shooing some kids away, one candy, and shot by a sniper. And so get the call that hey, we're out at the patrol base, Legion base, and this dude just calls on the radio who was just like the baddest son of a bitch in the company. I mean, just a tough dude, and like getting on the radio and hearing shake in his voice, I knew something was bad. And he just said, "I need you to get a medevac on the way to the base right now. We're on the way." And I was just like, "Okay, done. But you got to tell me more. I got to know something." And just said, "It's Coon. He's hurt. He's hurt real bad. It's a head wound." And so they pull up, and it's because of what had happened, and how well respected he was by the men. Hearing, Chris's voice when he called in, just kind of made the decision of, let's just don't have everybody come out. Let's block this area off, and everybody else stay inside. Handful of the senior guys. So me and one of the other platoon sergeants and a couple of the squad leaders, from another platoon, we went out and carried him in, and you know, helmet was off, of course, had a bandage on it, and one guy grabbed a leg, I grabbed another leg, or another guy grabbed the other leg, and I put my arms up underneath his shoulders and head, and we were carrying him in. Uh, and we didn't put him on a stretcher or anything, just wanted to get out and get him in. The doc was ready just to patch him up. The bird was on the way. And so, yeah, so the bandage came off, and that's when, I don't not talk about it out of, like if it were you and I sitting around talking about it, I'll share it, but just in the off chance that someone in his family, I just spare the details. just for, because
Absolutely.
it's not pretty. Yeah, it's not pretty, and just this sound he was making, so it's not going to end well, and so get him in there, they patch him up best they can, and me and these other guys are covered in blood and other stuff again because the bandage came off, and so the bird came, carried him out. Uh, Amazingly, still alive. Uh, but you knew, and this sounds harsh, but anybody would tell you like you don't want him to make it because if he does, he's going to be a vegetable. As cruel as that sounds, just again, it doesn't take much of an imagination to see what was not there anymore. So yeah, so that was when I went and cleaned myself up, and kind of, it's the beginning of the book, and I know what you're getting to is I was again just that numb feeling, and before I went out and addressed the men to give them an update, me and the other NCOs, myself and the NCOs, we all went to separate bathrooms to get cleaned up, and so yeah, that's when I looked up and I saw I had this cut on my face and didn't know what it was, and then kind of looked down and realized, there's pieces of bone stuck in my hands, and I had cut myself open. It wasn't deep, a gash, nothing like stitches. I'm not trying to, but it was just more the thought and an idea of, like I just remember stopping and looking, and it was just this, you know, I just, what the fuck, you know, fucking cut myself open with, some other dude's bone fragments from a skull. It just, it, it, it just sent me into a dark place just from that, the rage that I started to feel. I talked about the tattoo earlier of, what I'm capable of, and everyone's got it in them. I'm not saying that because you just got to be in those situations to know. And, uh, again, I kept it in. I had a job to do, but inside, man, was just, that's when I always like my, that's kind of when I quit giving a shit. And that's I always go back. That's when I talk about the 5 years of my life that I lost. It started on that day.
So you're kind of at a dichotomy there. You're don't give a shit, but you're still a company commander, right? Or have you released?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
you're
not yet. I was for
yeah, you haven't relinquished command yet. But
yeah, I
you're
had like almost 2 more months.
yeah,
Yeah,
so like just thinking of that dichotomy there, you're the man in charge. That's your company. And you
yep.
are your give a shit meter is gone. So how do you look at these other guys every day and expect them to have a give a shit?
Back to that. Be careful. The quote I use in the book is the old, be careful when staring into the abyss too long. At some point, it starts to stare back in. Your example earlier, be careful because you can turn into that kind of. I think while inside, I was able to uh, channel that and just like let it out when I was alone. And I cried all the time when I was alone. That thing, and oftentimes it was like tears of. It sounds silly, like tears of like I would get so sad thinking about those things, but then I would get so angry, I would start crying. But then I knew I just had to find a way to channel that and control that emotion because I did have a job to do, and and I knew, you know, not everybody could compartmentalize things, and yet at this point you have to start really. And dude, it wasn't just these events. So I mean, along this, like every Bradley assigned to me destroyed by EFPs. 3 of the 5 M1s. And so it's not like just these random attacks happen and that was it. These sad things happen. Like, they didn't just like, okay, guys, we got you good. We're going to give you a break now. I mean, it was day in, day out. So I was very cognizant of like keeping the ship righted. I knew we were about to change command. I knew the guy that coming in to replace me was going to be awesome. Exactly what the unit needed at that time. Of course, no one wants to leave command, uh, especially. In fact, I was supposed to, but because of everything that happened, they pushed it back about a month and a half. But I knew that if I did anything right for that group of men over all the time and everything we'd been together was to at least do my part to keep the ship righted during those tough times.
Does it scare you at all? do you look at it, and because this has never been an emotion of you, to have this rage and this anger and this not give a shit, that's like the exact opposite of what we've talked
Oh
about
yeah,
this whole hour and a half. uh
yeah, yeah,
does
no,
it scare you? Do you go, holy shit?
it did. I and I never acted on it. I'm uh, and proud of that. Uh, like maybe act on it a little bit, maybe push things the envelope in certain ways, but nothing, to the point that felt like I was violating any kind of oath or because at some point there's got to be a release, and the example I use is you know, and again back to just how stupid things got. Like we had tanks assigned to us, yet if you ever wanted to fire a main gun round in Baghdad's city limits, you had to get the brigade commander's permission. Are you going to call timeout in a fight? And like, oh, hold on, bad guys, hit pause. Sir, can I get your initials so I can fire this thing? No, so all this is going on. We'd lost the guys, and so I was out one day, and because I had a tank platoon assigned to me, I told them, I'm like, teach me in, and put me in a tank and teach me what the hell I'm doing, just so I can. So of course they did what they would do with any dumb officer. They put me in the loader seat. They're like, yeah, this is where anybody can sit in the loader seat. Uh, but I told them, I'm like, just in the off chance something ever happens, teach me how to load this thing. And so they did. The guys were great. And so we were out one day, and EFP hit the tank in front of us. Luckily, everybody was okay, but it was a monster EFP. I mean, just like literally like sucked the air. We were probably 7,500 meters behind it, and like literally sucked all the air out of our tank that far behind it. It disabled that other tank. Luckily, it didn't catch on fire. It didn't hit the. They always try to go to the fuel cells and missed it. I mean, just blew the track all to hell. And so then they did. That was one of the days it was kind of a coordinated thing. So some guys started shooting at us from the other side when the dismounts came out because we were tankers. We didn't have dismounts. We had to call the infantry guys out. Well, we didn't have Bradley, so they had to walk out there to come find us and came under attack. So we just sort of hit that deal of, at some point, like all this shit's happened to us and never once have we returned fire. And so we knew the area well enough that we kind of knew, you know, all right, if we blow that thing up, no one's going to get killed. No one lives there. So I just looked at him and I just said, let's send a fucking message. And just like from a morale standpoint, it was the craziest thing. And like you should have heard this tanker. He's awesome. Sergeant DeWolf, man, the guy's freaking stud. He was like, "Sir, do you remember how to load it?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I guess." So he's just like, "Grab that thing." So threw a round in there, and we blew this building up with a main gun round, and uh, no one shot at us after that. They were kind of like, "Holy shit, these guys shot back." Uh, and yeah, I mean, there's always a risk. There could have been people in their locals that we didn't know about uh, for whatever reason. Just kind of felt like something had to be done. And part of that was the anger in me talking. Part of that was, I think, the leader in me talking that had to at least give the men something. It's not a tangible win, but it's better than what we've been getting the last couple of months. And dude,
I
it was
would
like a
I would
freaking
argue that that is a tangible win. It's a
from a morale
physical.
standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I, I would argue that that is a tangible win. Um, June 3rd, you lose Sergeant Caleb Christopher.
yeah,
So that completes the 8.
yeah.
It's time. Let's talk about him for a minute, but then I want to go into leave and then kind of where we're at because we're on the downslope now. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Caleb's. Let's tell that story, and then we'll pick up at leave and kind of what goes on from there.
So he was a part of First Platoon. So uh, to me, it's no question. As part of the Legion 8, we trained up together. He was a part of it just because he was in First Platoon and was detached to a different unit, then came back to 1-8 and was technically a part of Delta Company 1-8 when he was killed. He was still one of our guys. But yeah, it was just this is another. And again, I won't share the details just because of family members and people. I will say it's so we had another suicide as recently as 3 years ago. And the suicide was a direct result of what happened that day. It's like literally one of the just most horrific, grotesque things. I'll just leave it at that. Uh, but was killed instantly. And so, yeah, so he was the eighth. In fact, I had left command at that point. This was a week after I left command. The other guy, the other commander, was just awesome. He just pulled me aside. He's like, "Look, I know he's assigned to me. I've had him for a month. These are your guys. You know, I'm supposed to give a speech about him, but I want you to write it, and I'll read whatever you write, for the commander's speech." And Caleb was just a stud, man. Awesome guy.
And so, do you feel yourself more and more? Or are we still sliding down this ravine?
At this point, I'm out of command, and go to the S3 shop, and I work in there, and they pretty much, uh, initially they wanted to get me out of there and like get me to brigade, to a brigade staff position at a different fob, just to completely get away from everything. I fought that, and my bosses agreed that even though I'm not in command, because of everything and because I'd been with these guys the first deployment, that at some point one of these guys is one like they may want a shoulder to lean on, and somebody outside of these. So it'd probably be good just to have me around, not for the day to day, like be removed from the unit, but there if one of the guys needs something. So they kept me there, and a part of that it was like hey, come to work, but like just take whatever time you need to kind of process all the stuff that take this time to get your head right, but also be there for any of the men if they need anything. But yeah, after a month, then went and did my S3 job, which was like any support desk. It's the first time I'd had really a true, staff job in the military, and it sucked. It's one of the reasons I got out.
Well,
But yeah, so then
I definitely think it couldn't have helped your mental state at all.
no, if anything, it gave me, and the guys I was in the three shop with were great, good, just laughing, just find any reason not to talk about it. But yeah, going back and living in the headquarters barracks in a room by myself, it's probably too much alone, free time by myself at night.
Well, as we come to find out, you're going to spend a lot of those times. So, July,
Yeah.
you go on leave, you get your tattoo. There's talks of divorce again. You're kind of reaching the end of, you're getting close to the end of your rope on this one. You're really starting to pull back away. What are you going through?
Like I said earlier, I didn't care. Now one very important part that we brought it up, but we kind of left out before that second deployment. Chrissy and I had a great year plus together in between the deployments. We did.
Absolutely.
We had our son
Absolutely.
Cole together, who was born, 3 months before that deployment. But I really didn't. I always talked about being the guy that could flip the switch and find a positive thing in life and focus on that. And for me, it's like all I cared about. Like, I can't get home fast enough. I can't get out of the Army fast enough. I don't give a shit what I do for a career. I just want to get back and be a father to Cole, and nothing else really matters. We get divorced, fine. We get divorced. I was kind of done putting the energy into that at that point. Not how that sounds when I say that, but again,
No.
back to the give a shit meter. Like, it was just, like, I was done. Like, you know what? You said it. Like, I mean, I was the guy that like was always trying to be there for everybody else, and all this. And yeah, had a little bit of a pity party for myself. Like, you know, it can't. It been this just slow. Just all right. This sucks. All right. A month later, wow, this sucks worse. A week later, wow, this sucks even worse than that. And it's like at what point, I'm like, well, if I just don't care about anything, then things will quit sucking.
But they didn't.
No, not at all.
They sucked worse and worse. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you
That's
even reach
the
a
fault of
point
that
where
logic.
as you're out, you are offered a position of a little bit higher command. You turn that down to resign your commission to get out. You get out, but everything's not gravy when you get out. There, you take a job, you're in Colorado, you train, the distance grows. You say in the book that it became an easy thing because you guys have been separated so much, but I mean, really, you guys are separated again. You're away from your son, the one thing that you wanted to do to get out. There's a divorce very much looming on the horizon. You're going down, and you find yourself, I would guess, pulling back away from everyone, really not talking to anyone. And now with Chrissy gone, there's really no one to talk to.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about being in the headquarters barracks and spending a lot of time alone, now you're really spending a lot of time alone. And I thought it was interesting that you talk about that you would set up your schedule to make you feel like you had a life. I thought that was super interesting in there, that you would set up to go out and you could go to a bar, order a drink, order your food, joke with the bartender, get your food, and be gone in 15 minutes. And that in your mind set up a regular, normal existence.
Well, there was enough, like, you start going down this, and I always kind of equate it to, like, you have, there's the norm, then there's the exception. And for me, the bad days were the exception. And, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't realize it. It may happen overnight. You don't realize it overnight, is that the exception became the norm. And, but there is still a part of me that realized that this path that I was going down, and that I needed I need to find some bit of interaction, but I don't want to go and like sit down and make the effort to like create some lifelong friend and go out and, go canoeing on the weekend all day. It was, well, hey, if I go to the same couple places and eat all the time, strike up a 10, 15-minute conversation with people, yeah, I can walk in and be like, yep, give me my whatever IPA and your flatbread pizza, and go ahead and give me my check too. And like literally, I would order my drink, sometimes order two drinks, my pizza, and I get my tab at the same time. And then I would BS with the bartender for a little bit and get my food, eat, and I'd be out of there. And I'd be, to me, I'm like, hey, I just went out, I interacted, I'm good. Look at me. Obviously I laugh at that now, but it made sense at the time.
Right. But I would ask the question, somewhere in your mind, even at that time, somewhere in your mind, you had to be telling yourself, this is not normal.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I knew it wasn't normal.
So do you think you were
But
fooling
my
yourself?
way, no, I thought that I was like, and again, you get on this thing and like, normal becomes, it's like define normal.
Right. Yeah.
Normal becomes relative. And so for me, like I was making it, I knew that I wasn't the guy that I'd always been. And I knew I needed to do something to get me back to being me. I had no idea what the hell that was, but I could fill these little small voids. And sometimes, and it sounds silly, that little 10, 15-minute interaction would make me, all right, cool. I'm back. I'm getting back out. I'm talking to people. But I didn't do anything. I just to stack on top of that. It was just wash, rinse, repeat, do the same exercise a couple of times a week and never make any meaningful change.
I mean, you go so far as you say that you try a lot of different things. You try religion. You try a counselor, the first counselor that you're immediately stand off with. The religion thing was pretty interesting to me also, because you used to read the newspaper, drink your coffee while they sang and everything. Then you went in thinking, I'll hear a message and that will lead me towards the right thing. And you never heard it until a little ways in, and then they start talking about inner walls. And you say, it spoke to me, but then you never went back. It's like, I want to get better, but I really don't want to get better.
I want to lose weight, but I don't want to work out. It's and I was a guy, and I really struggled with the religious aspect of it because I was a guy that was very religious growing up. I mean, heck, I went to a private Baptist college. It had always been a big part of my life. I'd been on a mission trip before. So I have Bible verses tattooed on me.
Well,
And,
can I mention
that,
something real quick while we're talking about this?
yeah,
Because I think it's very relevant for what we're talking about. When you had the private come and talk to you, And he said that
Yeah.
he prayed and Jesus Christ was his rock. And you told him, well, I watched these two guys pray and look what it got them.
Yeah.
And so that's
One
why
of the
that's why the religion thing was so interesting to me, that you thought, well, let me go to this. And then when you start to make progress, you're like, nah, not ready.
yeah, because I felt like uh, a hypocrite in a lot of ways. You could say, again, for something that's just been such a part of my life, and then when I started questioning it, and it was a culmination of all these things. And I said it to that kid after the seven guys had died, the first seven, and it's one of my life's regrets. That I just took this thing that this kid hung on to, and I gave him a reason to doubt it. And I didn't do it. That was the mind. I didn't do it to be a dick to him. I did it because that was the mindset I was in, and because, and I think I said it because all those things and the manner in which they went down, back to, and I didn't want to say it earlier because I knew we'd eventually we're going to get to this, but all right, things happen for a reason. All our past, are you know,
Predetermined.
if you can find a way to predetermine, like you can get to the end and say, all right, look at Legion 8 and everything we've done. It's great. It wouldn't happen. But, uh, you know, I know a lot of people that would give up that to not have the events leading up to it because of it. So that's where I struggle with the things happen for a reason. And then obviously, like, faith is a very easy thing to have, but it's a very hard thing to get back. And, uh, like, blind faith is a beautiful thing. And when I started questioning it, it not only made me say that horrible thing to that poor young kid, that's what led me when I would go in. Like, I would hear something that it would make me feel good, but I would immediately go to, but I'm questioning it in so many other ways. Like, I hear this message resonates with me, but then I have, that's the angel on this shoulder. Then I got, my asshole Jeff over on this shoulder. Like, well, don't forget how you felt. If that message did all this stuff and resonates with you, then how the hell could they let all these other things happen in such a painful way to these men? And it's not just I mean, you read the stories, the kid drowning in the freaking sewage, the guy going to meet his baby and dying on the way in. Like, yeah, I wanted to get that faith back, but I wasn't ready then.
So you meet this counselor, you guys kind of hit it off right away. What was it about this guy that was different than religion, the first counselor, and really ultimately what led you to this was your mom saying that she was worried about you, that she didn't think you were coming back from it?
Yeah, to hear your mom, you've heard me obviously talk about her, and to tell me that I looked dead inside, and it just broke her heart that she was nothing that she could do about it. Something I was going to have to figure out on her own. So that led me to at least give it another try. It didn't, like, again, not some overnight change. And yeah, so this guy was recommended to me, and I think a couple things that drew me. One, I laughed. So someone gave me his name. Like, he's the best guy out here in Tyler. I called him, and he started the conversation with, "Hey, I'll talk to you, but I'm not seeing any new patients right now. But I want to hear your story so I know who to recommend you to, if you're comfortable if I recommend you to somebody." He's like, "So give me the 10-minute Clip Notes version." And at like 7 minutes in, he just stopped and said, "Are you available at this time tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, you need to finish up." He's like, "No, I've changed my mind. I'm going to take you on. I'm going to find a way." And so there's part of it was just like, and I always laugh. I'm like, God, I was so freaking jacked up that this guy was like, "Hey, this is going to be a challenge," But there's a part was like, that meant something that he did it. And then I like the way of, he just kind of early on said, let's just get the tough stuff out of the way. Like, we kind of touched on it some of the day, and the whole mirror incident deal. When I had said that to the first counselor way before, he like just had a horrible answer. And, he was just like, "Wow, that sucks, dude." I'm like, "Yeah, no shit. I know that, tell me something I don't know." But he just looked at it and just like didn't bat away the whole thing of like, wow, this is something. He's like, Jeff Hollywood couldn't make something like that up, and it's something that is forever going to be a part of who you are. And you have to learn to accept it. And just those words, the idea of acceptance and choice, and me having the ability, where I'd spent 5 years, uh, the more I fought it, the more of a stranglehold those things. And I think it was just me, anybody who's been through any kind of significant trauma in life, you always want to, why did this happen to me? Why couldn't, and the more you fight it, the more it grabs you and the deeper it gets its claws into you. And then, owning it and accepting that it's forever going to be a part of who I am, and knowing that every day, uh, the choice of how I'm going to respond to that lies with me and not the actions of others, is ultimately what really led to me making meaningful change.
Well, I thought it was even interesting in you saying all that about him and what you liked about him. He even framed the mirror question to you different than anyone had. He asked,
Yeah.
are you looking into the mirror, or are you standing away looking at yourself looking in the mirror?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's for the whole thing of, and when I told him it was the latter, and I said, man, I've never thought of it that way before, but it's more like I'm kind of afar looking at myself. And he said, well, that tells me that you haven't accepted it. And Jeff, we can't deal with things unless they're real, and things aren't real until we accept them. And we have to literally and figuratively get you back to where you can look into a mirror again. Because again, for like 5 years, I did everything in my power to not look into a mirror. I mean, shaved my head, brushed my teeth in the shower, avoided it at all costs, because it just brought back that image. And again, back to that control, and then I would just fight it more. But starting that day is when I just started to, it's there. It's part of who I am. It still happens now. Just now it doesn't shit on my day like it used to.
Did you feel physically different?
I felt like,
Well,
for the
let
first
me let
time,
me
like,
ask this question this way, because let me describe a little better, and I think it'll help you answer the question. When I mean, do you physically feel better? As I'm reading your story and you're talking about the darkness and the music that you listen to, and just all these things, I just imagine you being exhausted all the time, just tired. And do you feel different? Do you feel like you're ready to go out into the world? Because when I read it, it just seems like you're ready to go out the door as long as you need to and then come back in.
man, it's so wild you say that. Like, I think back to the memories. I think about Colorado. Colorado is a beautiful place, sunny 300 days a year, but I think of it like cold and dark and snowy, the few times that it did. And when I got to Tyler, that first, year and a half I was there, it did happen to be one of the wettest falls they'd ever had. But it's like all my early time was in Tyler was like rainy and dark and overcast and cold. And then like when all this, and it sounds cheesy, but like I think back to that 5 year stretch and everything felt dark. And then I think back to once I started that process with him. And again, it wasn't an overnight fix, but like ever since then, like all the memories of my life are like more associated with sunshine and bright, happy, and being active and doing stuff. To your question, physically, did I feel better? Yeah. It was like, just like this mental that transitioned and, metamorphosis into physical of like hope. And hope is a beautiful thing. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt hope.
Another interesting thing that you point out in the book that I thought was, you never turned to drugs. You never really turned to alcohol. You drank and stuff, but you never
Yeah.
turned to the bottle. You never turned to drugs. And as far as I know, you never contemplated suicide.
No. No, I
And
just
this
went
is
into a
where the
hole.
story
Just
jumps off the track for me, because you have every single box checked for all of that stuff to be happening. And instead, you just hole yourself away. And the destruction that those things would bring still happened to you, just not with those pushing it along. It was almost
yeah.
you were your own worst enemy.
Yeah. I didn't need, it was, obviously I didn't turn to that because I had coal. If I didn't have coal, who knows where things would have gone. Uh, but just because I didn't do those things didn't mean that I didn't take uh, an emotional and physical toll on my body. And I was like, I wasn't a bad father back then, but I wasn't a father that I'm capable of being or should have been. Just because I wasn't the man during those years that I'm capable of being, and setting the example to him. So yeah, it was a different kind of toll that I was taking on myself, but a toll nonetheless.
Let's move to the workout of the day and this group, because this is the last thing that I looked at and I was like, wow. The people that you chose to tell your story to throughout the entire book. And I'm talking about the guy you called from Iraq and you said, I don't want to hear anything from you. I just want to tell you this. And you tell him the story, and then you tell your workout buddies the story. And just the people that you picked throughout the book to tell your story to made absolutely no sense to me. It does when you look at it. It does when you look at it overall. As you're reading it, though, until you get to the end of the book, you're like, I don't understand. He's got his mom. He's got Chrissy. He's got this. He's got that. But he's picking these random people to tell. Is it because you could spend that 15 minutes with them?
It's because it was random. There was nothing of any depth there. I mean, I got to know these people fairly well, but we weren't like best friends or anything. It was just that was one of the things the counselor encouraged me, is like, just try it out. Just go try and share this with somebody outside of your comfort zone. And this just seemed like an easy, I mean, hell, they were really the only people I knew in Tyler, the only people I had to share it with, but in hindsight, at the time, probably the least likely group you would expect. But in hindsight, it was the perfect group, because back to, maybe there are times where things are preordained of, if I wouldn't have shared it with that group, then the idea for the workout wouldn't have happened. And
well, it just seems to me through the entire book, that's what figured you out was all these things are happening for a reason. You tell them, you create this workout to pay homage to these guys. You have people that'll try out the workout to see if it'll work. I mean, you have all these things. And then when you finally launch this workout and you see the massive amount of people that come in, and you see people, you talk about one guy in particular that comes in, but you see that it's not just soldiers that you're changing their lives. It's other people that you're changing their lives at a almost core level of them to understand what's going on. And I'm talking about the guy who was losing his father to cancer, then heard your story and decided, hey, mine's not so bad. I can do this. And you change his thinking almost at a core level. You have to understand that this, as small as it may seem to you, that just this workout to pay homage to these people has changed so many people's lives.
Yeah, it's, and again, it's, you hear stories like that at first, you think, wow, that's cool. And then, it happens again and again and again. And, after a while you come back and I'm like, at some point, I don't know how many people have stopped, like, hey, what do you do for a living? And I'll tell them, and they'll be like, well, you should quit. And this is what you should do for a living. And it's not that it's me, it's the story of, it's the message behind it. It's not Jeff's story. It's the message of, what we all went through, and yeah, a lot of it's told through my eyes and my own personal experiences, but I think that I'm representative of the broader group. But yeah, and it kind of, and I think you probably remember the part in the book where Linda, Sergeant Green's mom, was at the one Gold Star event and was telling another Gold Star mom about an Legion 8 event coming up, and just started crying, and just said, it's like, sweetie, what's wrong? And she's like, my boy doesn't have a Legion 8. And, that comment there is a lot of what ultimately led to me deciding to write the book, because, I kind of mentioned to you before I'm a big proponent, and it's not, we kidded around about the soft guys earlier. It's not a knock on them. Those guys are awesome. And yeah, you hear more about them because their books are sexier and the stories are cooler. And young kids, when they go in looking for podcasts, they don't go and Google, Army infantry captain, they go and Google Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. And I get that, and they're awesome, but there's just so many more stories of like what me and my men went through, just because there's more of us. The stories are different. They're not better or worse. They're just different. And, if our story, can fill that void for someone that doesn't have a Legion 8, but if our message of, never letting your circumstance, past or present, dictate what you're capable of moving forward in life. The example we can set because we are just regular, conventional Army dudes. We're not these mythical. And again, I got plenty of soft friends. They would tell you, like, man, I'm the most mediocre, average guy in the world. Just I have a inability to quit, and that's why I was able to do what I do. But right or wrong, sometimes the perception of those guys is people don't feel like they can relate to them because they seem almost otherworldly. But you see an average Joe like me, and the men that I serve with, they can relate to that. And just a big believer that, and I say it all the time. I mean, I think it's the greatest gift that we have as humans is the ability to inspire someone else to say, you know what, if he can do it, if she can do it, so can I. And so that is just what the message of what Legion Aid and about what me sharing, my personal story through the book is trying to set that example and just show other people, so can you.
Well, let's talk about where people can find you, where they can help out the Legion 8 cause, and really kind of use that philosophy that you put at the very end of the book that pretty much everyone's a Legion 8. No matter what you're going through, you're a Legion 8. So first off, where can people find you?
Best place, I got my Facebook stuff I kind of do for family and the kiddos. I'll do some of my kid stuff on Instagram, but Instagram is where I try to do most everything. So it's Jeff R. Morris, pretty simple. I got a boring name. Then Legion 8 Foundation has its own Instagram page as well. It's Legion 8. It's the number 8, kind of as you got it there on your screen now.org. I will say the website. So there's a lot going on. I was kind of going one direction with one thing, with things. Then COVID hit and sort of pulled back Legion 8 a little bit. Just a lot going on with the kids, demanding job. And I always said, I'm not going to half-ass something that involves the legacy of my men. So I kind of pulled some things down, took the Legion 8 store down, just because the vendor I was going with, unfortunate situation there, family. So anyhow, I say all that, like we're getting ready to ramp things back up with Legion 8 to start doing some more events. We can travel around to them. It's kind of centered around the CrossFit WOD. I actually really don't even do CrossFit much anymore, but always will. But we're trying to really scale and grow Legion 8 behind it being just a CrossFit deal. And so I'm looking to partner with some different organizations, to scale it and grow it because it is a veterans organization, and at the root of it, it's about these men. But to your point earlier, I've probably seen as much, if not more, of an impact on non-veterans through the message of Legion 8. And so that's where I'm trying to find the best partnerships and directions to go to really, it comes back to that promise we made to the families of never let their boy's name be forgotten. And, I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a respectful way that also is one that can help make a difference in the life of others.
Well, I will tell you, Jeff, I've told you before that this book is absolutely fantastic. Everyone can read it. It's not just, like you said, a soldier story. I think that you can learn so much from it. Hearing the people that just come up to you at the end of the book. I mean, the last, 15 pages of the book, just to hear their stories and how it's affected them. You guys need to pick this up. You can pick it up on Kindle. You can pick it up on Audible. You can buy it on Amazon Prime. Please get a hold of this book and read it and listen to Jeff's story because it is an absolute, just amazing story of growth and of someone who thought they had lost everything and brought it all back. And Jeff, it is an honor to meet you, to have you on the show, to tell you this story. I don't know what else to say to you. I hope you all the future successes in the world, and thank you for bringing this book to us.
No, DJ, thank you, man. And it's, first and foremost, I appreciate the kind words about the book. But it's all about awareness and getting the story out there. And I tell people that, you've had other guests that have written books on there for guys like me, and we could talk offline about this story of trying to get a no-name infantry captain published out there. I'll just say this: we made it. I got an incredible agent, and made it to all the big publishers, the big time publishers, and made it to the final review board, to 4 of the 5. And every one of them said, love the book. These are their words, not mine. One of the best we've read in the space, but no one's ever heard of this guy. We don't think it'll sell. Which is fair. Hey, I'm a big boy. I can, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's just awareness, and I wouldn't have the opportunity to make awareness if it wasn't for shows like yours. So I appreciate what you're doing, not just for my story, for all the other great stories that you're telling. And I told you earlier when we were texting, just to don't ever stop doing it, man, and keep up the great work.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, guys, I think that's going to be it for the show. Once again, it's Legion 8. You can find it at legion8.org. You can find it on Instagram. They're starting to kick back up. Make sure that you go check out the book, Legion Rising. That's going to be it for the show. Make sure you check out our sponsor, blackpointtactical.com. They have awesome holsters. They have awesome gear for you guys to use. If you want more of me, you can find me on Twitter at DoublespeakDJ. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and you can find me on YouTube at the DTD Podcast. Remember, guys, you come here every week because the best stories are true, and we give them to you. That's Jeff. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.